Chapter 979. She was fair and pretty, but her personality seemed to be very quiet. She didn't look like a spoiled or annoying girl at first glance. Although Mother Chiao was dissatisfied with her son bringing his girlfriend here, she didn't say anything to her but turned her eyes to Xiao Fei again. Is she really your girlfriend? Absolutely. Xiao Fei put his arm around Feng Ling's shoulder. Feng Ling didn't move but put on a faint smile. In her heart she murmured, "This is a brother, a brother, a brother." In the past, it was normal for her to put her arm around her brother's shoulder. Xiao Fei had also put his arm around her like this before, but they were just brothers. Father Chiao didn't look good. You're going against us. Didn't I tell you a few days ago to come and meet her? If you really don't like her you can talk about it. But now you directly brought your girlfriend back. Are you asking us to slap her in the face? I'm just expressing my position. As for what you should do and say today, it's your business. But my girlfriend is here. For the sake of everyone's dignity, you'd better not talk about irrelevant topics such as marriage, blind dates, or getting to know each other. Qin Haodong said with a frown. It's better not to talk about that. Xiao Fei's tone sounded like a reminder, but Feng Ling could more or less hear his unhappiness with his parents' decision. If he was really in a good mood, he wouldn't have stayed up all night drinking outside last night. Seeing his attitude, Feng Ling was sure that he really just wanted her to do him a favor, so the little resistance in her heart disappeared a little. She tried to cooperate with him both in action and expression. You. Father Chiao was about to reprimand her with a cold face. At this time, Mother Chiao gently tugged at her husband's leader and said in a low voice, "Forget it. This girl looks very honest. She doesn't look like someone who will make trouble at the dinner party. Don't talk too much. If Ah Fei really likes her you can't force him. Let's go in first. Everyone is here. Don't let them wait too long." Father Chiao restrained his temper, glared at them again and entered the door with Mother Chiao. When they entered, Feng Ling commented in a low voice, "Your parents don't look like people who are difficult to deal with. Why are you so distressed?" "My mom likes girls who are honest and well-behaved. She doesn't think much of those young ladies from prestigious families. She just wants to introduce me to a girl who matches her family background. I'm not interested and I don't have the time, so you can be my shield for the time being. Okay, you're the type that she likes. At least tonight she won't target you. You can stay here with peace of mind." Feng Ling nodded. Just as he was about to follow them in, a long Rolls-Royce approached from afar and stopped in front of the hotel. Feng Ling was about to walk inside when she seemed to see a familiar figure from the corner of her eye. She looked back and saw Mrs. Feng Qinqiu getting out of the car. She had only met Mrs. Feng a few times, but for some reason she instinctively felt that Mrs. Feng must be a very gentle person. But every time they chatted, she didn't understand what they said. Didn't they say that there was only one daughter in the Feng family? Feng Ling had never thought much about those topics. However, when she saw Mrs. Feng, she instinctively paused and looked back at the person who continued to get out of the car. Qin Qiu's mother was also in the car, and she was the last to get out. Behind her there was another sports car. Feng Mingzhu got out of the driver's seat of the sports car, casually threw the electronic car key to the hotel security guard who approached her eagerly, carried her bag, and walked all the way inside without looking at the person who got out of the other car. Even though Qin Qiu was helping the old lady get out of the car and might need a hand, Feng Mingzhu had no intention of turning back to help. She even wanted to get rid of them and go in alone. Fortunately, there was a security guard who came up to help. The old lady's legs were not as agile as when they met last time. After getting out of the car, she took a few breaths, said something to Mrs. Feng and then walked up the stairs. "What are you looking at?" Xiao Fei looked back and saw Feng Ling standing there with no intention of leaving, so he looked in the direction she was looking at. When he saw Madame Feng, Xiao Fei was puzzled and then looked at the others around him. The head of the Feng family, Grandfather Feng and Grandmother Feng, rarely show their faces in front of others. They rarely attend these banquets. Usually Mr. Feng, Madame Feng and Feng Mingzhu will appear at these banquets. Occasionally Madame Feng's mother will come to take a look and come out to relax. If I remember correctly, these two are Madame Feng and her mother. Feng Ling didn't speak. Of course she knew them. After all, she had helped catch the gangsters and sat at the same table to eat. She still couldn't forget the way this old lady looked at her. "Let's go." Feng Ling withdrew her gaze. Qin Qiu helped the old lady up the stairs and said as she walked, "Mom, the weather in Los Angeles is getting colder and colder recently. If your legs are really uncomfortable, if you don't want to come out for a walk, you can rest at home. In the future, let Mingzhu come out to participate in these activities alone. She is not a child now. We don't need to accompany her all the time in this kind of party." Madame Dowager said as she walked. "It's not comfortable to be cooped up at home. I'm getting old, so I'll go out and walk more when I can. If one day I can't walk anymore, I'll be dead. That way, I won't have to be taken care of in bed." When they walked into the banquet hall, Feng Ling and Xiao Fei happened to pass by another person. The moment they passed by, Qin Qiu lowered her head to help the old lady tidy up her clothes, so she didn't see them. At this time, Feng Mingzhu was already in front, drinking a glass of champagne with several familiar ladies. When she looked back, she found that Qin Qiu and her grandmother hadn't come in yet. She immediately looked back impatiently. When she saw the two of them come in slowly, she immediately put down the empty wine glass in her hand and said, "Mom, let Grandma rest at home next time. This kind of occasion is not suitable for her." Madame Dowager knew that Feng Zhuzhu disliked her because her legs were not nimble, so she didn't say much. She had spoiled her granddaughter since she was a child, so she had long been used to it. She patted Qin Qiu's hand and told her not to get angry at the child here. Chapter 980. But Feng Mingzhu didn't think so. She had been holding a grudge all this time. In particular, everyone in the Feng family agreed to let Li Nanhing marry a cenotaph. Even her grandmother, who had always doted on her, didn't continue to oppose this matter. She felt that she had lost face and was completely isolated and helpless at home. She had nowhere to vent her anger, but there was no other way. However, from her attitude, it was obvious that she was angry. The nature of this banquet was very simple. It was just a gathering of the famous families in Los Angeles. Occasionally, some businessmen would stand together in groups to talk about some business and contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Most of the time, the socialites would stand together to gossip about which young lady had been dumped by whom, and which young lady had been cheated on by whom. Feng Ling followed Xiao Fei in the crowd. From time to time, when they met some acquaintances of the Qiao family, Feng Ling nodded and greeted them cooperatively, and then followed Xiao Fei all the way. However, because of Feng Ling, Father Qiao and Mother Qiao didn't specially arrange for any socialites to meet Xiao Fei. Xiao Fei looked as if he hadn't slept well last night. Now, holding Feng Ling's hand and walking in the crowd, he looked energetic and energetic. On the other side, Qin Qiu helped the old lady to sit down on a leather sofa next to the banquet hall. There were also several old ladies of other big families sitting next to her, who were about 70 or 80 years old. They were all a group of old ladies who couldn't walk very well but were unwilling to be left behind by these young people. Although they were all old, they were still wearing famous brands. Occasionally, two of them could stand up and walk a few steps with crutches in their hands. These old ladies sat together and had endless topics to talk about, such as what kind of wood the crutches were made of, what coats were custom-made by their children, and the changes in their family's business in the past few decades. Women were women. Even if they were old, they still had all kinds of psychology of comparison. As they chatted, more and more topics came up. Qin Qiu's mother was not in a good state, but she chatted with these old guys. When Qin Qiu came over, she happened to see that the old lady got up and sat down on the sofa on the other side, leaving the old lady's bag on this sofa. The old madam was afraid that the round jade would be lost, so a few days ago she specially asked a craftsman to custom make a very sturdy jade necklace to string the round jade together and hung it on the zipper of her purse. Looking at the round jade, she recalled that old mistress often sighed at this thing. If she remembered correctly, her grandmother once said that this round jade should be attached to the jade pendant that her fated younger sister wore. Looking at the jade, Feng Mingzhu's eyes grew colder and colder. A person who had been dead for so many years, what right did he have to occupy the hearts of everyone in the family? He had only existed in this world for a year, and he was still an ignorant one-year-old child. Did he have to be remembered by everyone for the rest of his life? She suddenly reached out and directly pulled the round jade and the jade essence chain off. She turned around and saw that her grandmother and the other old ladies were chatting excitedly and did not notice her. She clenched the round jade tightly in her hand, threw it into her bag and turned around to leave. "I'm going to the bathroom. You guys talk first." When passing by the group of socialites, Feng Mingzhu said lightly and turned to go to the bathroom. In the bathroom, Feng Ling had just walked into the small door inside when she seemed to hear the sound of high heels approaching from outside. She didn't pay much attention to it. She just felt that the person outside didn't seem to have any intention of going to the bathroom after walking in, nor did she hear the rustling sound when she washed her hands and touched up her makeup. Based on her usual habit of being careful, Feng Ling gave up the intention of going to the bathroom. She stood by the toilet for a while, then gently pushed the door open a crack and looked outside. She saw that Feng Mingzhu took out a round jade strung with jade essence from her bag and held it in her hand. She stood there and looked at the thing in her hand, clenching her fingers tightly as if she was considering something and hesitating. After 2 or 3 minutes, Feng Mingzhu suddenly threw the thing in her hand into the trash can by the side, washed her hands and turned to leave. Such a scene was nothing in Feng Ling's eyes, but no matter how rich the Feng family was, the round jade and the jade essence that looked expensive would be thrown away just like that. And she seemed to be very hesitant before throwing them away. There was obviously something wrong. Although Feng Ling didn't care much about the Feng family and Feng Mingzhu, she felt that something was wrong. She didn't know where her curiosity came from, but she instinctively walked to the trash can and saw that the thing fell on a clean plastic bag inside. She reached out and picked it up. The round jade felt hard and cold in her hand, which was very similar to the jade pendant she had been wearing when she was a child. She touched the outline of this round jade and saw that there seemed to be an exquisitely designed ring in the middle of the jade, but it seemed that a piece of jade could be inlaid in it. The size of the gap in the middle of this round jade? Feng Ling paused and suddenly raised her hand to touch her neck, only to remember that she hadn't worn that piece of jade for a long time. It had been placed in the suitcase under the bed at 11 base. But although she didn't wear it on her body, she felt that her jade pendant seemed to fit in it. The size seemed to be just right, but after all, there would be some errors in the size measured by her eyes, so she couldn't be sure if it was just right. If it was just right, what did it mean? Would the word Feng on the jade pendant have anything to do with the Feng family? Just as Feng Ling was wondering, suddenly, there was a series of women's screams and men's roars outside. Her eyes darkened. Years of training made her realize that something must have happened from those people's screams. She held the jade ring in her hand and suddenly walked out quickly. The bathroom was on the second floor of the banquet hall. As she walked out, she heard someone shouting, "Run, run! Some gangsters have sneaked in and kidnapped the miss of the Feng family. Those people all have guns in their hands. They are all a group of people. Run. Or you won't be able to run out later. Go to the back door." Hearing these words, Feng Ling was expressionless. Those people were all running to the back door of the balcony on the second floor behind her, but she didn't hesitate to go in the opposite direction. When she reached a dimly lit railing on the second floor, she lowered her head and saw the chaotic scene below. She saw that Feng Mingzhu, who had just returned from the bathroom, was held in the middle by 2 men in black suits with guns raised to her head. Feng Mingzhu was so scared that her face turned pale and she looked around with trembling eyes, begging someone to save her. Chapter 981. Mrs. Feng and the old lady were scared out of their wits, and the others were retreating in fear. Although the two of them were scared, after all, it was Feng Mingzhu who was kidnapped. They could only keep saying to those people, Don't hurt her. Our Feng family has never offended anyone from the underworld. We only have one daughter. Don't hurt her." However, those people acted as if they didn't hear him at all. They just held their guns and forced everyone around them to step back. They said loudly in English that was not very proficient, "Mr. Bob, hurry up and hand over what I want. Today I'll let your hotel and the grand banquet held by the United States Legal News to completely ruin your reputation." Many people on the first floor were so scared that they kept retreating. They had no idea what was going on. Feng Ling, who was standing on the second floor, noticed that the man who had just spoken raised his head slightly as though he was looking for someone. From their tone, it seemed that these gangsters had a grudge with the owner of the hotel, or there was some other reason. In short, the guests present today were just cannon fodder. If something really happened, it would at most be similar to the revenge of terrorists. If someone really died and something happened, even if the police arrived, they might not be able to easily suppress it. Some of the more courageous men were quietly protecting their family members as they moved back. However, what they didn't expect was that the group of gangsters wasn't just a few people. When those people moved back, 17 or 18 people wearing almost the same clothes suddenly rushed out from the corner. They seemed to be wearing the same security uniform. So all the security guards on the first floor of this hotel were planted by gangsters. This is a planned act of revenge and terrorism. Feng Ling placed her hand gently on the railing and stood in the dark corner where no one could easily detect her. She looked down indifferently. Suddenly, her phone vibrated in her pocket. She took it out and saw that it was a message from Xiao Fei. They had guns. She had been separated from Xiao Fei when she went to the restroom just now. The fact that he would ask this meant that he really understood her temper very well. The current situation was that even though both of them were expert snipers in 11 base, they didn't have guns in their hands, while those people had guns and knives in their hands and came prepared. It wasn't easy to save people or to escape from here. Xiao Fei was traveling with his family, and there were many people here who were familiar with the Qiao family. It was impossible for him to go alone. However, when Feng Ling looked down from above, she did not see Xiao Fei's figure. She guessed that he was probably observing the current situation from a corner like her. Don't move. Just when a young man who seemed to be slightly behind couldn't stand it anymore and was about to step forward to rescue Feng Mingzhu, someone suddenly jumped out from behind and aimed a gun at the back of his head. At the same time he pulled the trigger. Then suddenly someone fired a shot upwards and screams rang out again. Everyone present was so scared that they didn't even dare to move back. They could only shrink into the crowd and tremble. Originally, he was still wondering why the hotel's security guards suddenly disappeared, but he didn't expect the security guards to be such dangerous people. This hotel was also a very famous star-rated hotel in Los Angeles. For such a thing to happen, it could be seen that the owner of this hotel must have had a lot of dealings with various Taoists. He must have caused some trouble or found out some secret, which was why he was in such a big trouble now. Seeing that Feng Mingzhu was being held hostage, Mrs. Feng Qinqiu had been trying to go there, but was still forcibly pulled back by the people behind her. The old lady also wanted to go there, but the people behind her pressed her shoulders so that she couldn't move at all. She could only look at Feng Mingzhu anxiously. Mingzhu, don't be afraid. Grandma is here. Grandma is here. Although Feng Mingzhu didn't cry, her eyes were already obviously red, and the fear in her eyes was overflowing. She wanted to take a look at the people who held her hostage in a panic, but the people behind her pulled her hair hard and forced her to look forward. Don't move. Feng Mingzhu's face instantly turned pale because of the pain on her scalp. Feeling the ruthlessness of these people, her eyes were even more frightened. Help me. She looked in the direction of the crowd in panic, looking at those men who at least looked tall, begging someone to have the ability to rescue her from these terrible people, and kept mouthing, help me, she is asking for help. Suddenly, a security guard in black suddenly came out from the side, blocking Feng Mingzhu's sight. At the same time, the man who was holding Feng Mingzhu behind her suddenly hit her head with the butt of the gun in his hand. If you don't behave, I'll shoot you now. Ah. Feng Mingzhu instantly stiffened in pain, and the place where she was hit by the gun immediately bled, and a few traces of blood slowly flowed along her hair to her forehead. Seeing the blood on Feng Mingzhu's head, the old lady who was standing not far away and being held down by someone was so scared that her legs softened and she fell to the ground. Mom? Qin Xiu immediately turned to look at the old lady worriedly and reached out to help her up, but she was still forcibly pulled back by someone, and she staggered and almost fell down. Seeing this scene, Feng Ling put her hand into her pocket. She touched the round jade bracelet she had just picked up in the bathroom. Whether she had anything to do with the Feng family in Los Angeles or not, whether it was just a coincidence or her guess, at least she had met the old lady and Mrs. Feng once, and at least she could be sure that they were very friendly to her. Even if Feng Mingzhu was spoiled, the Feng family shouldn't die here because of a dispute between a hotel owner and the underworld. She stood in place and slowly retreated to the darkest and darkest place in a corner, where no one could see any of her movements. Recently, Feng Ling had been living in Li Nanheng's apartment. Her safety index was too high, so she didn't carry a gun with her. However, since she was a child, she habitually carried a dagger with her. Before going out, she habitually placed the dagger in the weapon bag on her waist. It was a very small bag about the size of 2 keys, and inside it was a very sharp folding knife. The moment she held the knife in her hand, Feng Ling stared at the man standing behind Feng Mingzhu. That man should be the leader of these people, either their boss or one of the masterminds of this revenge operation. Chapter 982. Feng Ling took another step back. While the group of people were focused on Feng Mingzhu, who was crying out in pain, Feng Ling, who was originally standing in the dark, suddenly pressed against the railing and leaped up. She directly jumped down from the 2nd floor. This kind of height of less than 3 meters was not a problem for people who had been trained for a long time in 11 base. The moment she landed, Feng Ling raised her long leg and kicked the person closest to her. Then he tilted the knife in his hand forward and pressed it against the throat of a gunman before he could react. The gunman's voice was instantly suppressed back into his throat. He looked at the person who suddenly appeared out of nowhere in disbelief, but the cold blade on his throat made him afraid to move again. Feng Ling had no intention of killing him. Under the other party's incredulous gaze, she suddenly raised her other hand and gave the other party's neck a hard slap. The moment the other party was knocked unconscious, she retracted the knife and swiftly snatched the gun from the other party's hand. She turned it around in her hand and determined the weight of the gun, the number of bullets in it, and the model of the gun in 2 or 3 seconds. The person who had just approached saw the situation and was about to raise his gun at her. Unexpectedly, Feng Ling, who was dressed like a sporty girl, suddenly threw the folding knife in her hand. It spun in the air and slashed across the man's neck. As the man cried out, a string of blood spurted from his throat and he fell to the ground. When Feng Ling jumped down, there were very few people in this position. Right now she had only killed 2 people. The people in front had been retreating in fear and had not noticed the situation here. She took back the dagger that was already stained with blood. She looked at the man who was twitching and bleeding on the ground because his throat had been slit. She stepped forward and took the gun from him. She casually put it into her pocket in case she needed it. "Please let go of my Mingzhu." The old lady sat on the ground, feeling a little dizzy. She was still begging. When the person behind her was about to pull her up, she turned around and hugged the leg of the security guard, begging, "If you want to hit someone, hit me. Don't hurt my granddaughter. I can't lose another one. Get lost, you old fart." That person kicked the old woman to the ground. "Mom!" Qin Qiu exclaimed. "Grandma." Feng Mingzhu was in so much pain that her tears had already fallen. She turned to look at the old lady on the ground, and her eyes were filled with grievance. "Grandma." Seeing this scene from outside the crowd, Feng Ling raised her eyes. "Big brother, some of these people are dishonest. They should have already called the police," someone suddenly said in a low voice. "What's there to be afraid of? If the Los Angeles police dared to interfere, we would still be able to appear here." Just as the person standing behind Feng Mingzhu was about to speak, before he could blink, he suddenly heard a gust of wind by his ear. One of the men behind him was suddenly kicked away, and the stick in his hand was snatched away. Just as the man reacted nimbly and dodged to the side, thinking that he would be able to avoid the stick attack, he didn't expect to suddenly hear a bang. He was shot in the shoulder. Before Feng Mingzhu realized what was going on, the hand that imprisoned her instantly loosened, and at the same time she smelled a disgusting smell of blood. She staggered and fell to the ground. She looked back, only to see that the person who had just abducted her was holding his shoulder with a painful expression, and then he turned back and said angrily, "Bastard! Where did this bastard come from? Kill her for me." Only then did Feng Mingzhu turn her eyes, only to see a figure in women's sportswear passing through the crowd. Before she could see clearly who it was, her hair was pulled up again by the 2 men next to her. Her scalp was in pain, and she bit her lips hard and did not dare to make a sound, but her eyes were fixed on the figure in the crowd, not knowing what had happened. Feng Ling's speed was very fast. She accurately found the security guards in the crowd, and with every step she took, she accurately slashed the knife in her hand 3 inches behind those people's waists. In just an instant, those people were paralyzed by the strong recoil on their backs for a long time. When they came to their senses, their backs were already covered in blood, and the clothes on their backs were all wet. The people around who had a look of horror were all dumbfounded. They did not expect that such a powerful person would suddenly appear, and from the looks of it, it was a young girl. They could not see her face clearly, but they could see her figure moving through the crowd. She was as swift and decisive as a leopard, and her movements were extremely beautiful. When someone behind her was about to catch up to her, Feng Ling casually pulled up the zipper of her sportswear, turned to the side and gave another handsome kick. Not only did she not give these people the slightest chance to retaliate, but she also did not seem the least bit tired. No one knew that this short-haired girl dressed in light-colored sportswear was a member of the sniper team that walked out of 11 base, and no one knew of her past. However, the girl's figure and speed were shocking. A person who could safely move through dangerous minefields in the face of terrorists as if it was flat ground, in front of this group of half-baked gangsters, dealing with them was just a piece of cake. But right now the most important thing was to divert their attention, lest they really hurt the innocent guests here. The old lady who was sitting on the ground saw that the situation was somewhat chaotic. Qin Qiu also took the opportunity to help the old lady up. The 2 of them wanted to go to the front to pull Feng Mingzhu over, but the moment they approached they were glared at by those people. Only then did they realize that although they had diverted many people's attention, Feng Mingzhu was still in their hands. If the 2 of them dared to go forward, the 2 guns stuck to Feng Mingzhu's head were likely to really pierce through her head. "What should we do?" the old lady cried anxiously. At the same time, a figure suddenly leaped out from behind Feng Mingzhu, pulled the heads of the 2 people behind her toward the center, and slammed into them harshly. When the 2 people were slightly dazed from the impact, the figure snatched the guns and shot through their wrists. At the same time she stretched out her long arm and pushed Feng Mingzhu, who was standing stiffly in place, forward out of the danger zone. Feng Mingzhu staggered forward and fell in front of the old lady. The old lady was filled with disbelief and excitement, and rushed to hug Feng Mingzhu, who was crying in hindsight. "Mingzhu, are you all right? Your head is bleeding. It hurts so much." Feng Mingzhu cried in the old lady's arms. Grandma? I thought you didn't love me anymore. How could that be? You and second brother are Grandma's most beloved children. It's good that you're all right. It's good that you're all right. Chapter 983. On one side was a peaceful life for the grandmother and grandchildren, while on the other side was an abyss of suffering. All of a sudden she noticed Xiao Fei, who had just rescued Feng Mingzhu, and was about to toss the gun in her pocket to him when she saw that he had already snatched the gun. She did not move, nor did she have any intention of handing it over to him. The two of them shuttled through the crowd with tacit understanding. There were already a few people on the scene who were about to die from having their necks slit. Those people fled in all directions from time to time because of the chaos. Those who were quick had already run out to call the police. Even if the police couldn't deal with these gangsters in this situation, most of the people present today were famous people in Los Angeles. They had to deal with them even if they didn't want to. Otherwise, if these people went to find trouble with the police later, it would be even more troublesome. Even if it was just a formality, the police had to be there. They couldn't afford to have too many casualties on such an occasion. Otherwise, it would definitely be big news. This wouldn't benefit either party, especially since her and Xiao Fei's identities in 11 Base would be discovered. 11 Base had just experienced a crisis because of her. She couldn't rashly allow 11 Base to stand in the eye of the storm again. She leaped up onto the table where the wine tower was supposed to be placed. Using the height of the table, she continued to jump up to the second floor. While everyone was still wondering who the girl was, the police had already rushed in. Xiao Fei's reaction was the fastest. When the group of people's attention was focused on the railing on the second floor, he reached out and grabbed the leader of the group. With a kick, he pushed him to the ground. This was the scene that the police saw when they rushed in. It was already a mess down there. Father Qiao and Mother Qiao looked in the direction of the second floor with slight confusion. They weren't surprised that their son was born in 11 Base and that Xiao Fei was skilled. However, although the girl didn't show her face, her speed was so fast that no one could see her clearly. But if they remembered correctly, the tracksuit. Xiao Fei's girlfriend? What kind of situation is this? How can there be such a powerful girl? At the corner of the second floor, Feng Ling quickly hid in an empty room. After withdrawing her hands, she lowered her head to see that her sleeves were dirty and stained with blood. But she was wearing thin clothes inside, so she couldn't take off her coat. Looking at the dirty blood on her sleeves, she was not very satisfied with her current speed. Sure enough, he felt a slight numbness in his arm when he made his move. His movements were also delayed for a second. Otherwise, he could have been faster and wouldn't have been splashed with blood. Seeing that the guests on the first floor would be fine for the time being because of the intervention of the police, Feng Ling, who had always been too lazy to care about these things, leaned against the door of the small room. After watching silently for a while, she rolled up the blood on her sleeves, hid the blood, turned to the balcony on the second floor and left through the back door. Before she left, she sent a message to Xiao Fei and left first. In such a situation, Xiao Fei definitely wouldn't allow her to show herself. After all, the incident in the military base had attracted a lot of attention. If the fact that she was a woman was exposed, this matter would really blow up. She did not want to reveal herself. Naturally, Xiao Fei would not allow her to step forward rashly. It was best for her to leave like this. After taking a taxi, Feng Ling sat in the car, glanced at the time and put her cell phone into her pocket. Her fingers once again touched the cold round jade bracelet. She took it out and held it in her hand for a long while. After returning to the apartment, she stopped the car and heard the sound of a text message. She picked it up and saw Xiao Fei's reply, "Go back in peace. As long as I'm here, they won't be able to stir up any trouble. Thank you for today." After reading it, Feng Ling put her cell phone back into her pocket and went straight to the door of the apartment. As soon as she entered, she was suddenly shocked by the sound of a car speeding past behind her. She instinctively looked back, only to see that Li Nanheng's car was only half a meter away from her. The wind brought by the car lifted the hem of her sweatshirt. Then, the tall black Hummer quickly stopped in the parking lot of the park not far from her. The man got out of the car, slammed the door and walked up to her expressionlessly. Seeing the man's expression, Feng Ling had a hunch that he seemed to know something. He should be in the base. Why did he suddenly come back to the apartment? Boss. Facing the approaching man, Feng Ling subconsciously stood upright in front of him. Li Nanheng's expression didn't change. He coldly looked at her from head to toe. "Where did you go?" "I was bored staying alone, so I went out for a walk." "Just for a walk? And?" Looking at her calm and composed eyes, Li Nanheng's cold brows moved. "Is boring to stay at home alone? My schedule in the base has been very tight for so many years. I'm not used to the sudden slowing down of life, but I'll try my best to adapt. Boss, if you have something to do, you don't have to come back to accompany me. I do have something to do. I'm expected to come back tomorrow at the earliest. The man lowered his eyes to look at her indifferently. His eyes shifted to the spot of blood on the fair skin below her ear. He reached out and touched it. Sure enough, it was a drop of dried blood. He rubbed it away. The man calmly took his hand back. I went out for a walk. It was very peaceful. Nothing happened? En? Li Nanheng coldly smiled. Little girl, have you learned to lie? Feng Ling, seeing that she couldn't hide it anymore, she thought for a while and said, I'm sorry, Boss Li. I just went out to help a friend. I saw someone being kidnapped, so I helped. But I don't think anyone will recognize that I'm from 11 Base. I'm not wearing 11 Base's uniform. I won't cause trouble for the base. When did I say you would cause trouble? She didn't know why this man came back angrily. It was as if he had eaten dynamite. Feng Ling didn't know what to say and just looked at him strangely. Li Nanheng coldly raised his eyebrows, picked up his phone, opened a communication app and enlarged a photo in it. The Chinese community in Los Angeles had a gathering today. Young Master Chiao took his girlfriend to meet his parents. This kind of photo is common in the Chinese community and can be published in the newspaper within an hour. You told me you just went to help a friend? As soon as Feng Ling saw the photo, the corner of her mouth twitched. Why didn't she notice that there were reporters around? Chapter 984. At that time, when Xiao Fei introduced her as his girlfriend, were there reporters standing next to her? And someone even took photos? Then she looked up at Li Nanheng's expression as if he had eaten dynamite. No wonder this man suddenly rushed back with a murderous look. Deputy Drillmaster Chiao was very kind to me in the base. I was also surprised to see him today. He said that his parents forced him to go on a blind date and asked me to pretend to be his girlfriend and accompany him to a dinner party. You can see that I didn't even change my clothes. You can see that I really went to help him at the last minute. I didn't even prepare, she explained sincerely. Hearing this, Li Nanheng immediately sneered. Pretend to be his girlfriend? No woman in the world will believe this trick. Only a girl who grew up in the jungle will believe it. Feng Ling, I also treated you well in the base. Why did you get angry when I kissed you? He asked you to pretend to be his girlfriend, but you really went to the party with him? Boss, I can only help you this once. With that, Feng Ling suddenly coughed and didn't want to continue this topic. Boss, I'm still not feeling well. I'm a little tired. I'll go back to rest first. If you are busy, you can go back to the base first. Then she turned to leave. Stop. Feng Ling was about to leave, but hearing the man's unfriendly tone, she had to stop and silently turn to look at him. Boss. Li Nanheng was much taller than her. He looked down at her calm expression and stepped forward. When Feng Ling didn't understand what he wanted to do, her wrist suddenly tightened. The man directly pulled her wrist up, and the blood that had been hidden in the cuffs for a long time appeared in front of the man in an instant. Feng Ling, what is this? Li Nanheng looked at her coldly. Seeing that she couldn't hide it anymore, Feng Ling tried to pull her arm out of his hand, but the man held it tightly and looked at her coldly. You went to a party, pretended to be someone's girlfriend and came back with blood? There was a group of gangsters causing trouble at the banquet. I saw them holding Feng Mingzhu hostage. Although I don't really like her, she's innocent, so I helped her. This blood is also someone else's. I didn't suffer any injuries. As Feng Ling spoke, she tried to pull her hand out, but after struggling for a long time, she was still unable to do so. She immediately stopped moving and looked at him. Boss, let go. However, just as she was about to frown in displeasure, she suddenly felt a piercing pain on her chin. She did not even notice a small wound that she did not know how she had injured herself. It was hidden under her chin, where it was not easy to notice when they were facing each other. The man's fingers brushed past her wound, causing her expression to freeze in pain. Only then did she realize that she was also injured. Although it was very slight, it was only such a small piece. Don't let yourself get hurt again. The man saw that she was in pain and put down his hand. Go back and apply some simple medicine to disinfect it. The man's voice rang. At the same time, he did not say anything more. He directly held her wrist and brought her back to the direction of the apartment. Feng Ling followed him silently. She raised her eyes to look at the man's tall and broad back and pursed her lips. In fact, when she was at the banquet earlier, an image suddenly appeared in her mind. If she did not successfully escape at the scene, would Li Nanheng suddenly appear like in the past every time she could not solve the situation, just like in the movies, stepping on colorful auspicious clouds and descending, although it was only an image that flashed through her mind, and although she had successfully escaped at the scene, she was really a little flustered to be intercepted by him the moment she returned. She found that she seemed to be a little unable to control her heart. A child who did not even know who she was raised by a wolf, who did not even know what a woman was, could she really fall in love normally like other girls? He had also said that wolves were born to be loyal. She was also loyal. If she really set her mind on him, then she really could not do without him. However, she did not know much about Li Nanheng's identity and many things outside the base. She did not dare to approach him, nor was she sure if she should. But she did not want to be so spoiled. Because she really found that she seemed to like him. Very much. She was brought all the way back to the apartment by Li Nanheng. After closing the door, the man coldly asked her to sit on the sofa and not move. Feng Ling obediently sat there without moving until the man came over with medical cotton swabs and disinfectant. He looked at her coldly and then bent down to treat the wound on her chin. When the disinfectant fell on her skin, the pain was a little unbearable. She did not move and just quietly watched him. Li Nanheng helped her apply the medicine. His cold, dark eyes glanced at her and met her eyes that had been staring at him. The man's cold brows moved slightly. He suddenly scolded with a cold expression, "What are you looking at? Are you moved?" Feng Ling. She instantly looked away and turned to get up from the sofa. "My clothes are dirty and stained with dirty blood. I'll go change." The man did not force her. Recently there were a lot of things in the base in the Li family. Although he was in the mood to tease her, now was not the most appropriate time. He put away the used medical cotton swabs in his hand and put them in the wastebasket by the side. The next day, Li Nanheng said that he had something to do and went back to the Li family. He was not sure if he could come back tonight, so he told her to stay at home and not to run around. The so-called run around was obvious. Feng Ling was too lazy to talk to him. This man had become more and more domineering in recent days. She was just living in his apartment, not his possession. Couldn't she even decide who to meet? Besides, the relationship between her and Xiao Fei was pure. She was very calm and had never thought too much about it. Before going out, Li Nanheng continued to give her repeated orders. Not to mention Xiao Fei, even if Kay and the others came out of the base to look for her, she was not allowed to meet them, especially at night. He asked her to be careful. Her arms would occasionally be numb. If she couldn't even hold a knife steadily, she would not even have the ability to protect herself. She should not try to help her at the banquet again. Feng Ling did not agree. She just told him to hurry back to the Li family, in case the elders became impatient and came over to beat him with their crutches. Hearing this, Li Nanheng suddenly smiled, stretched out his hand and pulled Feng Ling over. He kissed her on the cheek. Feng Ling was stunned by the kiss and then he whispered in her ear, "Be good and wait for me to come back, okay?" Chapter 985. After kissing her, the man let go of her shoulders and left. Feng Ling stood in front of the door in a daze for a long while, her face burning. She stared at the closed door and stood in front of the door for a long time before returning to her senses. They had only stayed here for a few days, but for some reason she felt as though they were an old married couple. She was actually hoping that he would come back earlier. The Li family. The old men sat together in a circle. Nanheng hasn't returned yet? He'll be back today. The matter with the Feng family should be put on the agenda. Previously, when the military was in trouble, fortunately the Feng family stepped in, so the military didn't dare to be too arrogant. I think the marriage between the two families should be held sooner or later. Didn't Nanheng say that he could marry the Feng family's second son after he turns 18? Now that he's already past 18, if he refuses to marry Feng Mingzhu and insists on taking this path, then even if he has to kneel, he must bring back her cenotaph. We can't go back on our words. Besides, this time the Feng family has also helped us greatly. We also owe them a favor. We can't keep dragging this matter. Have you discussed it with Grandfather Feng and Grandmother Feng? After we bring back the cenotaph, directly send it to the Li family's ancestral hall and guard it for 3 years. After 3 years there will be no more relations between them. At that time, Nanheng can talk about marriage at will. Otherwise we can't just end the Li family's bloodline just like that, right? He should at least marry a normal wife. I've discussed it and the Feng family has agreed. They just want to find a home for that poor child. Since Nanheng suggested this, he must do it. If he wants to guard it for 3 years, then so be it. After 3 years he can marry any wife he wants, but in these 3 years he must be the Feng family's grandson-in-law in name. Also, the matter of the Minghun cannot be leaked. He must announce to the public that he is married. He can't tell anyone, nor can he explain the reason. For the sake of that poor child who has passed away for many years, and to preserve his dignity and purity, I don't think this request is too much. Indeed, and this time the Fong family has also helped 11 Base greatly with the commander's death. Nan Hung has no reason to refuse and neither do we. Let's do it this way. Let's wait for Nan Heng to come back. As the sky gradually darkened, Fong Ling cooked a bowl of noodles alone in the kitchen. In the past few days her cooking skills had improved a lot. Previously she had to cook it until it was almost soft before she was sure it was cooked. Later she had to pick one out to taste it. Now in fact she had cooked it a few times when Li Nanheng was not around. She could already feel if it was cooked with chopsticks. She added some of the seasonings she bought from the convenience store. Tasted pretty good. Then she took the bowl to the living room and sat down. She turned on the TV and ate. At about 7 o'clock, Fong Ling washed the dishes and took the initiative to pick up the mop to clean the room and the floor. Although there would be an auntie who would come to clean the room every few days, she would clean it out of habit when she lived here. Her phone suddenly rang on the sofa. She walked over to pick it up and saw that it was a call from Qiao Fei. She hesitated for a moment before picking it up. "Brother Qiao? Come out and have a seat?" Qiao Fei's voice was still low and hoarse. From the sound of it, there seemed to be the sound of a car. Fong Ling glanced at the time. "Didn't I say that after leaving 11 Base, we shouldn't meet again? I've already helped you once. Brother Qiao, I remember that you are a person who knows what to do." After a moment of silence, he said, "I'm downstairs in your apartment." Fong Ling was surprised. She turned to walk to the floor-to-ceiling window, opened it and walked out. She looked down and saw that there were many cars in the parking lot. The distance between the 10 floors was not high or low, but she could clearly see the headlights of a Bentley flashing in the parking lot. After seeing that car, she said to the phone, "You should go back. You shouldn't see me for business or private reasons. Brother Qiao, don't tell me you drank too much again." "And you guessed right. I just drank some wine. There is some in the car. Do you want to come down and drink with me? You know my alcohol tolerance is not good. Even if you want to find someone to accompany you, you shouldn't look for me. I only want to look for you." Fong Ling was speechless. "I'm hanging up." "Fong Ling, I drank too much and can't drive back. Can you send me back again?" Fong Ling pursed her lips. "Do you think I'll fall for it again?" Qiao Fei chuckled lightly. "Have you become smarter?" Li Nanheng said that he was very scheming. Now she realized that Qiao Fei was indeed very scheming. He really had the cheek to use those vulgar methods to woo girls on her. Was he bullying her because she didn't know anything? "If you can't drive, I'll call for a designated driver for you. I just want to look for you to drink. I don't want a designated driver." From his tone, it seemed that he was really a little drunk. Had the matter at the banquet not been resolved yet? Was he still trying to force her to marry him? Or was there something else? Fong Ling did not ask much. Besides, since the police had intervened that day, it was just a dozen or so gangsters. It was not a big problem, so there was no need for her to continue asking about the follow-up. Furthermore, with Qiao Fei around, it must have been resolved. Thus, there was nothing for her to ask. "I'm going to sleep. Brother Qiao, drive back by yourself. Be careful." With that, she hung up the phone and turned it off. She turned back to the window and threw the phone onto the sofa. After an hour of exercise and shower, it was already past 9 o'clock at night when she was ready to sleep. Fong Ling returned to the bedroom and was about to draw the curtains. The window on this side happened to be facing the same direction as the balcony. She lowered her head and saw that the car on the parking lot had not left. However, the headlights of the car did not continue to flash. It was parked there quietly. Fong Ling silently glanced at it for a while and directly drew the curtains. After lying down, she was too lazy to pick up the phone on the sofa that had been turned off. She only stared at the chandelier above for a long time. After thinking for a while, she got up and opened the curtains to look down. The car was still parked there. She had only urged him to go back over the phone. She had already made it very clear, but he still refused to listen? Last time, they had clearly agreed that they would not see each other again and that they would only help once. The people of 11 Base had always said what they wanted and would never go back on their words. What was he doing? Fong Ling got up, put on her clothes, picked up her coat and walked out. After going downstairs, she walked to the parking lot and directly walked to the side of the Bentley. There was no light in the vicinity. The street lights and park decorations in the apartment complex were a little far from here. It was pitch black. She walked up and knocked on the window of the driver's seat. Chapter 986. The car window rolled down and Xiao Fei glanced at her. Get in the car. Seeing the drunkenness in his eyes, Feng Ling immediately frowned. Do you like to come here to look for me when you drink too much? I was driving by and knew you were here, so I couldn't restrain myself. I just wanted to see you and leave when the light in your room went out. So? Why did you still call me? Maybe I drank too much and was not sober enough. Xiao Fei smiled self-deprecatingly. Are you sure you want to talk to me like this? I have wine in my car. Let's drink 2 bottles? I don't want to drink. Feng Ling's expression showed no sign of compromise. Go back. I shouldn't have come down. Seeing that you haven't left, I came down to see you. Brother Qiao, you know my character very well. There's really no need to pay so much attention to me. Xiao Fei was silent for a moment and suddenly smiled. It seems that you know everything. Feng Ling did not speak. She didn't know and didn't understand before. But now she should have seen it. Although she shouldn't have come downstairs to meet him, he was here after all and he came because of her, so she should come over to take a look. She always had a very clear balance in her heart. She knew what she should do and what she shouldn't do. It doesn't matter. I've never hidden my feelings. Previously in the base you didn't want your identity to be discovered, so I didn't say much. In fact, from the beginning, I knew that there were many things between you and Li Nanheng that I couldn't interfere with. Although I tried, it seems that this is not something that can be achieved with hard work. Your heart has long been his, right? Xiao Fei leaned against the back of the driver's seat and looked at her sideways. You avoided me because you didn't want to be misunderstood by him. It seemed that he had seen through her thoughts. Feng Ling did not speak. Come up and sit for a while? Is it comfortable to be blown by the wind? I won't do anything to you. I'm drunk now. If you fight, I will definitely be beaten to the ground. What are you afraid of? Xiao Fei glanced at her with a smile. Feng Ling raised her eyebrows and looked at him. I don't have to get in your car. Let's have a chat. After all, we've known each other for so many years in the base. I'm the first person to discover your secret. This time Feng Ling did not speak anymore. She hesitated for 2 seconds and got into the car. After sitting in the car, Xiao Fei directly handed her a bottle of wine from the back. Feng Ling took it but only placed it aside and did not open it to drink. He didn't force it. He just laughed self-deprecatingly, opened a bottle and drank it. Seeing him drink so quickly, Feng Ling was silent for a moment before saying, You seem to be very unhappy after leaving 11 base. Feng Ling Feng Fei Ma. Feng and Ling Feng. Feng Ling didn't have a home or parents, so she didn't understand the pressure outside the base. She wasn't good at commenting on things she didn't understand. Seeing that he was in a bad mood, she sat here silently to accompany him. Do you know what I like about you? Xiao Fei placed the bottle of wine down and turned to look at her with slightly tipsy eyes. I like your personality. You don't ask what you shouldn't ask. You don't talk too much and you don't explain too much. You're actually a very passionate person, but time and experience have slowly tempered you into a cold and aloof person. But only those who understand you know that you're actually not cold. You just have a sense of propriety in your heart and you've grasped it very well. Sometimes the charm of one's personality is really important. Regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, you'll still attract others. Feng Ling slightly curved her lips. Thank you for the compliment. Xiao Fei raised his eyebrows. Don't you have anything to say to me? Feng Ling was silent for a moment before saying, Brother Qiao, I don't know much about relationships. I know how you feel about me, but I'm very clear that I don't feel that way about you. Xiao Fei let out a long sigh and leaned against the back of the chair as if he had lost all his strength. He laughed at himself and said, And I know. So go back early. Feng Ling picked up the phone. You're not sober enough. I'll call a designated driver for you. Xiao Fei closed his eyes and did not stop her. After Feng Ling made an appointment with a designated driver and informed him of the location, she placed the phone down. She glanced at the bottle of wine that she did not drink and did not say anything more. She directly pushed the car door open and got out of the car. He watched as she left just like that. Although she came, she only rejected him and did not give him any chance at all. Xiao Fei thought that he could accept it, but he actually could not. Even though he had left 11 base and would not have many chances to see her again, he still felt indignant in his heart. Seeing that she was about to leave after getting out of the car, the man in the car abruptly pushed the car door open and rushed forward. He grabbed her wrist and turned her around angrily. When Feng Ling heard his voice, she subconsciously wanted to turn back. However, the moment she turned back, she almost fell into his arms. She staggered and hurriedly stepped back. However, Qiao Fei directly hugged her and pressed her tightly in his arms. He rested his chin on her neck and hugged her tightly. Feng Ling. Feng Ling's body instantly stiffened. She instinctively felt that her body was covered with barbs. She rushed to push him away, but Qiao Fei held her tightly. Feng Ling, can you consider me? I can give you everything you want. Freedom, happiness, everything. We've also been together in 11 base. In fact, I've been in contact with you longer than Boss Li. I also know you well. Give me a chance. Consider me. Don't do this directly. Brother Qiao. Feng Ling furrowed her brows and pushed him hard. Let go of Qiao Fei. Feng Ling panicked. She abruptly pushed his lower abdomen harshly and raised her leg to push him away. However, Qiao Fei endured the pain and held her tightly again. Feng Ling, let go of me. Feng Ling, I don't want to let go. Let go. All of a sudden, a cold chill came from a certain direction. Before Feng Ling could push him away, she abruptly felt a chill on her back. She abruptly glanced to the side and saw that a tall, black Hummer had driven over. It stopped 5 meters away from her and Qiao Fei. The car window did not roll down. It simply stopped there. Feng Ling's expression stiffened. She rushed to push him away. Qiao Fei's body reeked of alcohol, indicating that he was currently irrational. Feng Ling harshly stepped on his feet. Let go of me. Just as she finished speaking, the sound of a car door being slammed 5 meters away sent chills down her spine. In the blink of an eye, she saw the tall and handsome man walking over. Chapter 987. Feng Ling could clearly sense the killing intent in the man's eyes, even though he recognized him as Qiao Fei. Qiao Fei, hurry and let go. Feng Ling hurriedly pushed him while secretly reminding him, hurry and let go. Feng Ling, I. However, before the drunk man could finish speaking, his back suddenly tightened. The man abruptly pulled him away from her. He was still slightly tipsy and hadn't raised his eyes to see the situation clearly when he received a heavy punch on his face. He staggered back several steps and leaned against the door of the Bentley. Only when Qiao Fei was knocked back against the car door did he wake up slightly. He abruptly raised his eyes and instantly met Li Nanheng's fiery eyes. Boss. When Feng Ling saw Li Nanheng's sudden punch, it was too late for her to stop him. Before he could turn around and punch Qiao Fei again, she rushed to stop him. However, Li Nanheng expressionlessly waved her hand away. Boss. Seeing that he was really angry, Feng Ling hurriedly reached out and hugged his arm. Boss, don't misunderstand. Brother Qiao drank too much. He didn't mean anything else. We're all members of 11 base. Don't beat your own people outside, boss. Out of the way. Boss. Li Nanheng suddenly lowered his eyes and looked at her coldly. I told you to get out of the way. Feng Ling knew what he was angry about. Earlier, she didn't expect Qiao Fei to suddenly rush over to hug her, but she also didn't think it was right for them to fight here. Furthermore, it shouldn't be because of her. She held his arm tightly with both hands. Even through the clothes, she could feel the blood vessels and muscles on the man's arm because of the angry preparation to hit someone. She hugged him tightly. Stop hitting me. Seeing that she was trying to stop him, Li Nanheng's expression became even worse. He reached out to push her away, but Feng Ling suddenly turned around and stood in front of him. She opened her arms and took the initiative to hug his waist with great force. She could smell the faint smell of alcohol on Li Nanheng's body. Did these two men have an appointment today? One drank and the other came back with the smell of alcohol. One was in a bad mood and the other did not seem to be in a good mood either. She hugged his waist tightly. When the man stiffened because of this, she pressed her head against his chest and said, Li Nanheng, we're on the same side. Don't fight. If it weren't for Qiao Fei's presence, Li Nanheng might have been in a good mood when she took the initiative to give him a hug. But now, this little woman was forced into this state because of Qiao Fei. Ever since Li Nanheng returned to the Li family today, he had been under the pressure of the promise he had casually made and the shackles of moral kidnapping imposed by the Li family and the Feng family. He didn't want to affect her mood when she was resting because of his mood, but in the end, he couldn't help but want to come back to accompany her. Who the F***ck would have thought that the moment he came back, he would see his little woman, whom he did not even dare to kiss in order to calm her down, being forcefully held in the arms of this bastard Qiao Fei. Feng Ling, the man's voice was right above her head, ringing harshly, if you don't want anyone to die, get out of my way. Boss, calm down. He really just drank too much. There's nothing between me and him. Feng Ling hugged his waist, pressed her head against his chest, and explained in a muffled voice, "Stop fighting." Xiao Fei leaned against the car door. Although Li Nanheng's punch was not particularly harsh, it was enough to make his mind muddled for a while. At this moment, he recovered from the muddled state and slowly steadied himself against the car door. Looking at the scene in front of him, he suddenly smiled and raised his hand to quickly wipe the corner of his mouth. When he lowered his head to see the trace of blood seeping out from the corner of his mouth, he immediately smiled again and raised his head to look in that direction, saying, "Boss Li, this is not the way to snatch a woman. This is not 11 base, not the training ground. Do you want to use your fist to do the talking? You're really not King afraid of death." Li Nanheng was about to step forward, but the girl in his arms held onto him tightly, refusing to let him move. He lowered his head to look at the head in his arms and frowned. "What are you doing? If I cripple him, will you still be able to become enemies with me? Let go of me." "No. Boss, you can't be like this. This is all a misunderstanding. Do you think others can't see you fighting here? There are people coming and going here, and it's not like 11 base is a place where outsiders can't enter. Right now, the base is in a state of panic, and a large part of the reason is because of me. Right now, if you and Xiao Fei fight because of me, then I should be the one who should scram." Feng Ling's long and muffled speech caused Li Nanheng to more or less calm down. However, his eyes were still coldly staring at Xiao Fei, who was standing by the car door fearlessly and laughing. "Boss Li, even if we leave the base, I will still call you boss." Xiao Fei used the tip of his tongue to touch his cheeks that had a slight taste of blood. He said coldly, "When it comes to chasing a girl, fair competition has always been important. You are very good, but I'm not bad either. If she likes you, then I've lost. But there's nothing wrong with me expressing my feelings in my own way. You don't need to look as though you want to kill me. America is also a society governed by law. Your Li family is not the only powerful one. If you want to kill someone outside, it won't be that easy." Feng Ling frowned and turned back to shout at him, "Xiao Fei, stop talking. Hurry up and leave." Xiao Fei retracted his gaze and looked at Feng Ling again. "I want a fair competition." "What competition? I'm not some fairy-like beautiful girl. After pretending to be a man for so many years, I don't even know how to love someone. There's no need for anyone to do anything for me. Even if I die outside, no one will remember me. I'm not worth it." "You're worth it." After Xiao Fei finished speaking, he did not say anything more. He raised his hand to wipe the corner of his mouth and chuckled lightly. It wasn't clear whether he was laughing at others or himself. He then opened the car door, took off his coat and threw it into the car. He stood by the car door for a while, as though restraining the urge to walk over and fight back before sitting in the car. The Bentley honked a few times on the parking lot and then drove away resolutely. After confirming that Xiao Fei had left, even if Li Nanheng wanted to beat up someone, there was no one to beat up. Feng Ling let out a long sigh of relief and then abruptly let go of the man she had been hugging tightly. She was about to take a step back when her waist suddenly tightened. The man pressed her back into his arms. When she raised her head in confusion and was about to speak, he abruptly bent down and kissed her hard. Chapter 988. The man's sudden kiss was so strong that she couldn't bear it. Her body staggered back uncontrollably, but the man's arm held her tightly in his arms, locking her in his arms. The overwhelming kiss made her instantly lose the strength to resist. Even her instinctive struggle and retreat turned into a feeling of numbness all over her body. Her nerves trembled with the sudden intense and somewhat excessive kiss. Feng Ling could clearly feel that the man was not in a good mood. She could also feel his anger. She closed her eyes and allowed him to kiss her passionately. Even when the man's hand tightened around her waist as though he was about to break her waist, she did not make any sound or struggle. It wasn't until she was really out of breath that he finally let go of her. However, he only gave her a second to breathe before he kissed her again. He ignored the pedestrians and cars passing by in the apartment, ignored the embarrassed gazes and fingers of the passers-by, and kissed as if there was only him and her in this world. Feng Ling's entire body turned soft as she leaned against his chest. She felt as though all the air in her lungs was about to be sucked dry, and she could not muster up any strength. The man suddenly let go of her. Just when she thought that it was finally over and they could finally talk properly, the man expressionlessly grabbed her hand and turned to walk into the apartment. "Boss." Feng Ling's heart suddenly pounded. She didn't understand what he was going to do, but she vaguely understood what he wanted to do. She hesitated for a moment but was still forcibly dragged into the door of the apartment building by the man. The man brought her all the way into the elevator and then all the way into the apartment. When the door opened, Feng Ling stumbled and was dragged in by the man. As the door closed with a ping sound, she felt her body being thrown uncontrollably onto the sofa closest to the door, in the middle of the living room. Feng Ling's foot tripped over a railing by the coffee table. Wen Yi, who could barely stand, suddenly fell back. The moment she fell heavily on the sofa, the man pressed down on her. When she subconsciously shrank her neck and tried to turn her face away, he pressed her against the sofa, pulled her face with one hand and kissed her fiercely again. The kiss in the apartment was completely different from the kiss outside. One with anger and emotion, the other with obvious lust. Feng Ling's hands hammered Li Nanheng's body twice and were firmly pressed by his sides. The man's kiss was domineering and turbulent. Without any hesitation, he turned to attack her sensitive parts. She shrunk her neck and wanted to hide, but she couldn't help but tremble because of the kiss and the surging feeling. Boss, wake up. I know you're angry." She tried to make him regain his senses. However, the man directly held her chin and sealed her mouth again. He kissed her deeply for a long time, and just as Feng Ling was about to lose control of his kiss, he suddenly reached out and lifted her up from the sofa. Her body and feet were suspended in the air, making people instinctively want to hug the person in front of them. Feng Ling was no exception. She hugged the man's neck and lowered her head to see the things in the man's eyes that she couldn't resist. The man carried her into the bedroom, kicked the door shut and pressed her into the bed. Following that, whether it was taking off her clothes or his own, his movements were so smooth that Feng Ling had no room to push him away. The man kissed her passionately. All of a sudden, the sound of the man unbuckling his belt could be heard in the air. Feng Ling closed her eyes. She had a premonition that the heart-wrenching pain she had experienced that night was coming again. Right now, Li Nanheng was not in a coma. He was very awake and his body was not as weak as it was when he had a high fever. She had a premonition that she might die. However, just as the man was ready to move, he forcefully pressed her hand down and firmly pressed her arm to the side because he kept kissing her. All of a sudden, the sequela left by the snake bite on Feng Ling's arm was the occasional sudden pain and numbness. She was used to this feeling, but being pressed against the bed and unable to move, the pain caused her face to pale. Her body, which had been slightly heated by the man, also turned cold and trembled. Because of her sudden tremble, Li Nanheng immediately stopped moving. Her trembling from being kissed was different from this tremble. It was impossible for Li Nanheng not to feel it. He immediately thought of something and lowered his head to see her pale face under the dim light of the bedroom. He then turned to look at her stiff arm that was pressed under his palm and withdrew his hand. As soon as her arm was free, Feng Ling quickly moved her hand back and then moved it very slowly, trying to make the pain and numbness in her arm disappear. Looking at her painful and careful movements and her forbearing expression, Li Nanheng felt as though someone had splashed a basin of cold water on his head and sobered him up. He abruptly got up and at the same time, pulled the quilt over to cover the girl who was almost unclothed by him and turned to walk out. Feng Ling waited on the bed for the pain in her arm to pass before she sat up with the quilt in her hands. The apartment was very quiet, so quiet that she could hear the sound of water coming from the bathroom after Li Nanheng returned to the bedroom opposite. Needless to say, he went to take a cold shower. She lowered her head to look at her arm, rubbed it with her other hand, and then looked in the direction of the bedroom opposite. After thinking for a while, she got out of bed, tidied up her clothes and then sat on the bed, not knowing what she should do. 15 minutes later, the sound of water stopped. Not long after, Li Nanheng came out in a dark blue bathrobe, sat on the sofa, lit a cigarette and smoked for a while. Then from Feng Ling's angle, she saw that the man seemed to be leaning against the sofa and did not move for a long time. Boss Li's mood seemed to be really not right. If it was only because he saw her and Xiao Fei hugging each other earlier, it would be fine if he was jealous. He would not be like this. She got up and walked out. She walked to the sofa and saw that the man had already pressed out the cigarette in the ashtray on the coffee table. He seemed to be resting on the sofa with his eyes closed. Even when he heard her approaching, he did not open his eyes. However, Feng Ling could tell from his breathing and closed eyes that he was not asleep. Chapter 989. She stood by the sofa for a while. Seeing that he was leaning against it, she thought for a moment and went back to the bedroom to take out a thin blanket and gently covered the man's body. Li Nanheng closed his eyes and did not respond. She sat on the carpet in front of the sofa, looked up at the man who seemed to have something on his mind and asked, "Boss, are you in a bad mood?" The man did not respond. "Is there something on your mind?" He still did not speak. Feng Ling wondered if he was having a headache because of the alcohol. She was about to get up to see if she should go behind the sofa to massage his head when the man's voice suddenly rang hoarsely. "Feng Ling, do you like me?" The girl sitting on the ground still had a hickey on her neck from his kiss. Although her clothes were tidied up, it was still a bit messy. She sat on the carpet, hugging her knees. She did not change her position. She just looked at him. The man lowered his head from the sofa and looked at the girl sitting on the carpet. "Answer me." Seeing the coldness and seriousness in his eyes, Feng Ling inexplicably felt that her answer seemed to be very important to him. She couldn't answer carelessly. So he thought for a while and said, "Boss, I don't know much about relationships, but according to the feelings I have for you and other men, I don't feel too repulsed to be with you." Li Nanheng still looked at her expressionlessly. "Don't give me so many reasons. I just want to ask you, do you like it or not?" Feng Ling looked into his eyes and slowly nodded. "I like it." The man's slightly cold gaze was instantly moved. Sitting on the sofa, he threw away the thin blanket on his body, lowered his head, lifted her chin and kissed her lips. This kiss was very gentle, but it also touched the tip of her tongue. When Feng Ling tried to express her feelings and was about to respond, the man suddenly paused because of her response. His eyes, which had just calmed down after a cold shower, darkened again. He released her lips and pressed his forehead against hers, saying hoarsely, "You're not even 18 years old. You're still a child. If you like me, can you wait for me? When you're 20, I'll marry you and make you Mrs. Li N." Feng Ling did not have any thoughts about marriage. In fact, she had never even thought about it. The words Mrs. Li were also unfamiliar to her. But for some reason she yearned for it. So looking at the man's face, she slowly nodded. "And wait for me for 3 years." The man's voice was so hoarse that it was almost inaudible. She nodded obediently. "Do you want to go back to the base? Continue to pretend to be a man and live in the base. Live the life you want. At least for these 3 years, if you want to go back to the base, I can help you." The man pressed his lips against hers. "Want to go back?" Feng Ling answered without hesitation, "Yes." Suddenly, the man's hand gently caressed her head. He stepped back and looked at her tenderly. "In the next 3 years, you can go back to the base and continue to find your sense of belonging. We'll go back to the sniper team and train like before. As for your gender, only I know. No one else will know, okay?" Feng Ling didn't quite understand why he suddenly allowed her to return to the base and why he suddenly said that she could continue living the life she wanted in the base for the next 3 years. He clearly wanted to hide her outside the base and didn't want her to go back to the base with those men, right? But of course it was good to return to the base, and it was even better to return to her original state. She nodded. "All right." Seeing her obedient look, Li Nanheng stared at her face. "Aren't you going to ask me why?" "I won't. Boss, everything you've arranged for me is definitely for my own good. Besides, boss, you don't like to explain too much to others. You have your reasons for your decisions. I'm a member of 11 Base and it's my duty to obey all your orders. I'm also the person you like, so you won't hurt me. I trust you," Feng Ling answered very sincerely. Li Nanheng looked at her for a long while and suddenly smiled. "I have one more request." "What?" "After returning to the base, move in from the room next door and live with me. You know, the bed in my room is quite big." Feng Ling. After confirming that Feng Ling's arm was recovering very well, Feng Ling was finally allowed to pack her luggage and return to the base as long as she let the arm that had been bitten by the snake rest as much as possible during daily training and went to the infirmary to have Dr. Wen give her a massage. Feng Ling was finally allowed to pack her bags and return to the base. It seemed that since she was injured in the military last time, she hadn't officially returned to the base for at least 3 months and hadn't received training for such a long time. Because of Qiao Fei's departure, the sniper team changed to a new drill master. Li Nanheng was still the main drill master, and the new deputy drill master was surnamed Shen. It was said that he was transferred from the elite team. He was not tall and didn't look as good as Qiao Fei. She didn't need to guess to know why Li Nanheng transferred such a person to be the deputy drill master. He really didn't give her any chance to be distracted. During the training break, Kay sat next to Feng Ling and asked her, "Your hair has almost grown past your ears. You didn't have a chance to shave it when you were outside. Although your hair wasn't as flat as ours, it wasn't so long. What's wrong? Your arm still hurts. Is it inconvenient? Do you want to come to my place tonight? I'll shave it for you." Feng Ling was about to speak when Li Nanheng, who passed by, turned back and said coldly, "Shave what? You can't shave it." Feng Ling. Kay turned to look at him with a dumbfounded expression. "Boss, I mean, Feng Ling's hair is too long," Long hair? It's not very popular this year. Those who look like the Beatles outside have long hair, but they are no different from other men, right? Li Nanheng argued with a deadpan expression. K, is it popular for men to keep their hair a little longer this year? Is it too late for me to grow it a little longer now? Feng Ling, Li Nanheng glanced at him indifferently and said coldly, if you aren't afraid of scaring the girls outside to death, you can keep it. What? Boss, you think Feng Ling's hair is better, but I want to scare people to death if I grow it a little longer. I also have good facial features, okay? Kay was not convinced. Li Nanheng first glanced at Feng Ling's face appreciatively and meaningfully, then glanced at Kay with disdain and turned away. Kay, boss, you're too biased. Be careful, or I'll spread the news that I found you in Feng Ling's room last time. Feng Ling. Chapter 990. After returning to the base, Li Nanheng didn't just occasionally go to Feng Ling's room. He clearly went there often, okay? After the evening training, Feng Ling went back to balance her limbs as usual and showered as usual. After showering, she walked out of the bathroom while drying her hair and habitually glanced at the door. She was wondering what was wrong with Li Nanheng tonight. Did the sun rise from the west? A few days ago, he wouldn't go back to sleep peacefully unless he took a few bites of her. Why didn't he come tonight? Just as Feng Ling walked to the bed while drying her hair, she suddenly turned to look out of the window, only to see that the window was pulled open by the man from the outside and he walked in. Feng Ling, she almost forgot that her door was no different from a window. Because the balcony was connected to his balcony, her window was even less hidden. He clearly could come as he pleased. Why didn't you go through the front door today? Feng Ling was startled at first and then looked at him strangely after calming down. The man smelled the fragrance of the shower gel in her room and walked over to sit on the chair by her bed, watching her as she had just showered. Because she had already exposed her gender in front of him, and he was the only one who dared to casually come to her room at night, she no longer wrapped her chest cloth after showering. Right now, she was wearing a very loose white t-shirt. Her hair was half wet and hung on her forehead. She casually pulled it down with her hand and combed it down with her fingers. I know you just showered at this time, so I came to see you. The man had the same routine attitude as a few days ago. He spoke in a dignified manner, but every time after seeing her, he would carry her over and nibble on her. Feng Ling was almost used to it. She fiddled with her hair again and said, actually, my hair has indeed grown a lot. It's fine if I don't return to the base, but now that I'm back, I have to continue being a man. The length of my hair doesn't quite meet the base's standards. Your hair is the length specially granted by the base's boss. No one dares to say anything. Feng Ling. Boss, you're abusing your authority. I've worked hard for 11 base for so many years and only hit a wife in the base. So what if I don't let my wife shave her hair? What's wrong with that? He lowered his head and kissed her lips, which still had the refreshing taste of toothpaste. I didn't say how long you have to keep your hair, nor did I force you to find your femininity, but shaving your head flat is really too exaggerated. You didn't have such short hair in the base before. Feng Ling didn't know what to say. You don't have to keep your hair long and I don't want you to find your femininity, but shaving your head flat is really too exaggerated. Did you notice when my hair grew? Feng Ling was surprised. The man snorted and bit her lips as if punishing her. He pressed her into the bed and nibbled on her mouth, chin, and neck for a long time before finally letting her go. He held her in his arms and pressed her against his chest intimately. He said hoarsely, I've been paying attention to you since you came in when you were 13. Do you believe me? Let her. At that time he was suspicious of her. This man had never dispelled his suspicions of her. Other people had been living with her for so many years, but he had left the base for 2 or 3 years, but he still saw through it. Although he didn't say it clearly and she didn't ask much, he clearly wasn't surprised when she confessed to him in the Snake Valley. Why did you ask so much? You only need to know that I only have eyes for you, right? The man lowered his head and kissed the top of her head again. Feng Ling actually wanted to complain, but hearing his straightforward confession, her face heated up. She wanted to get up from his arms, but the man refused to let go. Don't move. I'll hold you for a while longer. Boss, you should go back to your room to sleep. Otherwise you'll have to take a cold shower again tonight. The man immediately snorted. Do you know how uncomfortable it is for me to endure it every day? So why don't you grow up quickly? I'll give you 3 years. It should be enough for you to grow up. Feng Ling secretly rolled her eyes. He had already eaten her up before she had even grown up. But he didn't remember it. She didn't have anyone to reason with. Feng Ling almost fell asleep in Li Nanheng's arms. The room was so quiet that she really felt sleepy. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Feng Ling opened her eyes abruptly and sat up quickly. Li Nanheng was also about to fall asleep. He was woken up by the sound, and the girl in his arms suddenly struggled out of his arms. He frowned and looked at the door with some irritation. So late. Who knocks on the door? Li Nanheng asked. Feng Ling didn't know. She had been in the base for so long. Those who were close to her usually knew that her room was not very close at night. Especially after she moved next door to Boss Li, those people were very sensible and never came to disturb her. Who could knock on the door at this time unless it was? She turned back and gave Li Nanheng a look, meaning for him to quickly go back to his room through the window. The man lay on the bed and didn't move. He had no intention of hiding in his room. He just raised his cold brows and watched her walk to the door. The door was opened. Immediately, two young men around 15 or 16 years old grinned at her. Master Feng Ling. We just heard that you are here. Did we disturb your rest? Today we have a few things to take note of in the base. When we called you, we found that your phone was turned off, so we came to look for you. Feng Ling looked at the two boys outside the door and the corner of her mouth twitched. In the past few years, the base hadn't recruited many new people. A few days ago they actually started to recruit new people again. Recently there were many new members in the base. Most of them were boys in their teens just like them. On the second day after she came back, the base hall assigned more than 10 new members to the sniper team. 2 of them were assigned to her so she could occasionally train these 2 new people. And these 2 boys were very sweet and kept calling her Master Feng Ling. She coughed. It's so late. Are you sure you want to ask me at this time? Did we disturb your rest? We just learned that you are living here and saw that the light in your room is still on, so we came over. The 2 boys were a little embarrassed. Sorry, we just arrived at the base and were assigned to such a powerful sniper team. We were a little excited and wanted to talk to you, Master. Chapter 991. Feng Ling could understand this kind of excitement. She was also very excited when she passed the assessment and joined the sniper team. But she was not good at showing that kind of emotion. Looking at the 2 teenagers, Feng Ling smiled kindly. If you're excited, you can go to the training ground and run a few laps. It's not convenient for me now. Let's talk tomorrow. The 2 little boys didn't understand what she meant. Seeing that they couldn't ask, they suddenly said, Then Master Feng Ling, can we go into your room and sit for a while? I heard that only the most powerful people in the sniper team are qualified to live in this building, and I heard that every room in this building has a large balcony facing the direction of the training ground. It's very good. Feng Ling paused and didn't speak, but the 2 boys in front of the door were stunned a few seconds later. They raised their heads, watched the man who slowly walked out of the room, and suddenly felt a sense of oppression. Feng Ling sensed their gaze and subconsciously turned her head. Li Nanheng had walked behind her. He was still wearing a black uniform and black trousers, with a thin and cold expression. He had one hand in his trouser pocket and his eyes, and a little cold. The 2 teenagers outside the door were not short. They were still in the puberty stage and were already more than 175 centimeters tall, but facing Li Nanheng they were still too short. The gap between them was also very obvious. The 2 boys looked at Boss Li, who actually appeared in Feng Ling's room. This was the Boss Li they had only admired from afar after entering the base, but now he was standing in front of them, oh no, standing behind their Master Feng Ling. At the same time, Boss Li's lips were a bit cold. Don't you know what time it is now? Did you come to 11 base for training or for a vacation? Feng Ling. Only then did she realize why Li Nanheng was always so unapproachable in front of the newcomers. He really had a temper. If you wanted to do anything in front of him, you would first be frozen to death by his eyes. How on earth did she survive under his suspicious and scrutinizing gaze when she first entered the base? Boss Li. The 2 boys were extremely excited under the man's cold gaze. Seeing that the 2 of them were still so excited that they refused to leave, Li Nanheng's cold face gradually became more expressionless. He glanced at them, turned around and walked inside, saying lightly, It's late. Those who should go back should go back. The curfew rules in the base are very strict. If you want to break the rules as soon as you come in, I won't let you stay even if you pass the assessment. Feng Ling turned back to look at his back and then at the 2 stunned boys outside the door. She gave them a look, and when they returned to their senses, they hurriedly turned to leave. She then closed the door. The room returned to silence. Feng Ling turned back and glared at the man in the room angrily. Why didn't you hide when you saw someone coming? You actually dared to challenge them in front of them, scaring them so much that they would probably be traumatized by you in the future. Are you afraid that they won't find out what's going on between us? Li Nanheng lowered his head and glanced at her. Is there anything between us that can't be discovered? Adultery. Every night you come over and kiss me. Feng Ling glared at him. Looking at her coquettish expression, Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows. He said lightly, "Why do I have to hide? Is that something a man should do?" Feng Ling. They had clearly agreed that after returning to the base she would continue to disguise as a man and he would help her keep her secret. However, even though this man did not reveal her secret, the possessiveness that he displayed all the time made it obvious that there was something wrong. She glared at him. You just want everyone to find out that I'm a woman, right? My attitude towards you in the past is no different from the way I treat you now. It's because you have me in your heart and are afraid that others will find out that you're so sensitive. Do you think everyone doesn't know that there's something fishy between us? At such a late hour, apart from these few newbies who would dare to knock on your door? Who would have such a head on their neck for nothing? After so long, who wouldn't be able to tell? Feng Ling. Are you saying that they think you're interested in men? He lowered his eyes to look at her. She did not appear to be much smarter than before after returning to the base. Xiao Su and Han Jin clearly knew about it when they were in Cambodia. As for the others, they didn't have the guts to say anything. It's up to them what they want to think. It's not something I need to worry about. Feng Ling stared at him for a long while and her heart inexplicably relaxed a little. No wonder Han Jin and Xiao Su didn't seem to have changed when they talked to her recently, but they no longer acted like brothers. It turned out that they knew about it. When she was in Cambodia, she was in a coma and underwent surgery for so many days. Han Jin and Xiao Su were also there at that time. It was possible that they knew about it. Both of them were tight-lipped people, so there was indeed nothing to worry about. However, she still said, I've hidden it in the base for so long. If my gender is exposed because of you, I won't let you off. The man chuckled. His laughter seemed to come from his chest. He suddenly reached out and pulled her into his arms. He lowered his head and bit her lips. How do you want to let me off? She hurriedly put her hand on the bedpost and looked at the man who pressed her here. Looking at the man's handsome face, her heart faintly trembled. This feeling of her heart became more and more obvious day by day. Especially after returning to the base, she returned to her original living environment. She found that her feelings for Li Nanheng seemed to be really very special. Different from others. If my thing is exposed, I'll pester you for the rest of my life. Feng Ling didn't know where she learned these words from, but these words suddenly came out of his lips. The man immediately looked at her, and then his brows were shrouded in a layer of smile. What are you smiling at? She wondered if the sour lines she had just learned were a little too boring. She was about to explain when she heard the man say while holding her tightly, Then I'll pester you for the rest of my life. Looking into his deep eyes, she instantly felt an inexplicable palpitation, and even her mind went blank for several seconds. Her heart moved, and she suddenly took the initiative to tiptoe and kiss the man's lips. It was just a kiss and she was about to push him away. However, when they were less than 2 fingers apart, the man suddenly pressed her back into his arms. Chapter 992. Although the sky outside was already dark, but the light in the room was very bright. The height difference was too big and Feng Ling was leaning against the bedpost. Feng Ling felt a little breathless every time the man held her chin and kissed her. And then every time the man took advantage of her being kissed until she was weak, his hand would reach into her clothes, to take advantage of her. Li Nanheng, you can't come to my room like this every day. Feng Ling pushed him, panting, and turned her head to say, We agreed to let me continue to be a man. That's in front of them, not in front of me. The man's voice came close to her lips. In front of me, be your little woman again. Feng Ling wanted to say that she probably wouldn't be able to be a little woman in this lifetime, but the next second she was suddenly lifted up. She let out a low cry, and the man directly sat on the bed, letting her sit on his lap. She placed her hands on his shoulders, and her eyes were still somewhat frightened. Just now, she almost thought that he was going to press her on the bed and do it. She couldn't help but ask, Don't you plan to go back to your room tonight? I don't want to go back every day. The man kissed her lightly on the lips. When was I not driven back by you? Feng Ling, sitting on his lap, she really felt that it was a little dangerous. I want to go down, you. Before she could finish speaking, the man held the back of her head with one hand, forced her to lower her head, and pressed his lips against hers again. A week later. Everyone in 11 base found a problem. Recently, the elders of the Li family seemed to be frequently entering and leaving the base. Although they did not alight from the car, they seemed to be looking for Boss Li, but Boss Li seemed to be refusing to see them. Another day passed. Last night, Feng Ling trained those brats on the training ground. She trained until very late and slept at almost 1 o'clock in the night. Li Nanheng did not wait for her and entered her room in the middle of the night. He directly held the little woman who was sleeping soundly on the bed into his arms and slept with her in his arms for the entire night. The next morning, when Feng Ling opened her eyes and saw Li Nanheng's face, although she was a little dazed, she was not surprised. She pushed him away and got up to wash up in the bathroom for morning training. After showering, she walked out of the bathroom and saw the handsome man sitting by her bed. His hair was messy, and his eyes were not as cold and indifferent as usual. There was only a hint of indifference, and there was a hint of laziness and sexiness when he just woke up in the morning. Who said that last time? After returning to the base, at most you will come to see me at night at most. You will never spend the night in my room. You will never spend the night in my room. Li Nanheng glanced at her, unhurriedly picked up the black coat on the bedside and put it on. After putting on the coat, he said lightly, "I'm going to leave the base for a few days. I'll be back in about a week." The man. Li Feng Feng. Feng Feng Yu. Ling, Li Feng. Li Feng and Feng. The man, Feng. Li Feng. I was afraid that I would miss you, so I came to hug you to sleep. Is there a problem? It was just a week away from the base. She and Nanheng hadn't spent every day together, had they? It seemed that Boss Li would often go out for a few days when he was busy. He was the person in charge of the base. He had to take care of both inside and outside. 1 week, 7 days. Was there any difference? Feng Ling stood by the bathroom door and pursed her lips. It seems that the things you are going to do this week will be very hard for you. The man looked at her and smiled lightly. You have already begun to miss me? Then he got up, walked over and pressed her against the bathroom door. He lowered his head and kissed the corner of her mouth. This time, you may not be able to use your phone for the time being. Stay in the base. If you need anything, just tell Han Jin and Xiao Su. They will help you. Feng Ling. Boss, you are going out for 7 days, not 7 years. I have been fine in the base for so many years. What are you worried about? I only worry about you because I love you. Even if you are bitten by a mosquito, my heart will ache. Don't you understand? The man bit her lips. Feng Ling did not speak but looked up at him. Lover? At this moment, the man's cell phone rang. He kissed her lips again, glanced at her, picked up his cell phone and turned to go out to answer the call. She didn't know what they were talking about on the phone, but from the man's tone, it seemed that he was impatient. He responded coldly and walked out. When he opened her door and walked out, she felt that the man's footsteps seemed to pause for a moment, but he did not turn back and closed the door for her. The room was silent. For the next 2 days, Li Nanheng was not around. After taking a shower at night, Feng Ling looked at the quiet room without the man. She was really not used to it, and in the past 2 days her eyelids often twitched. Could it be that Boss was sent out on a dangerous mission? Was his cell phone turned off? At night, Feng Ling turned over and really couldn't sleep. She picked up her cell phone and called Li Nanheng, but the other party's cell phone was indeed turned off. It was the 3rd day after Li Nanheng left the base. In the morning she trained normally. At noon, when it was time to eat, Feng Ling took her 2 little disciples to do intensive training. She was so busy that she did not have time to eat, so she did not hear the various news and things that were spread in the base cafeteria at noon. In the evening, when she finally found time to go to the cafeteria to eat, she heard several members of the other teams at the next table discussing while eating. Boss Li is too fast. I haven't heard that he has a girlfriend before. How did he suddenly get married? Who the F***ck knows. But I heard that the Li family and the Feng family have always been friends. Maybe Boss Li and that Miss Feng have been engaged since childhood. Because of the engagement, he has never had any other girlfriends. Now that the time has come, he should hurry back and marry that beautiful young lady. That's right. Li Nanheng nodded. I seem to have seen that young lady of the Feng family on the news before. The young lady of the Feng family that Boss married should be her, right? She is quite beautiful and looks like a standard young lady from a respectable family, but she seems to be a little arrogant. But as a woman, it's good to be a little arrogant. It's better to be a little spicy. Our boss probably likes this kind of woman, huh? Isn't this the only daughter of the Feng family? Then it must be Miss Feng. Boss, you're really lucky with women. This is too sudden. There was no news a few days ago. Today, the news of your marriage was suddenly announced by the media. It really caught me off guard. Chapter 993. So boss suddenly left the base these days because he asked for a marriage leave? That's right. We're getting married in the day and we're going to consummate our marriage in the evening. Oh, Boss Lee's identity, family background, and everything he has done for so many years are all enviable. I didn't expect that his marriage has already been properly arranged. Marrying such a rich girl, the Fong family's status in Los Angeles is not bad. I'm really envious. Fong Ling lowered her head and gently fiddled with the food on the plate. Suddenly she lost her appetite. There were all kinds of rumors in the base. But it seemed that no one dared to casually talk about Li Nanheng. Especially the topic of Li Nanheng's marriage. But even if she didn't believe it, she couldn't eat the food in front of her. She thought of what Li Nanheng had said recently and what he had told her before he left this time. As soon as she put a mouthful of rice into her mouth, it tasted like wax. She raised her head to look outside the base cafeteria, then at the people sitting at the table next to her. She got up and went to another table to get a glass of milk to drink. However, when she went to get the milk, she heard people talking about Li Nanheng's marriage again. They also said that they saw the news of the marriage between the famous Li family and the Fong family in Los Angeles today. Fong Ling picked up her cell phone and searched for the keyword Li family in Los Angeles. The search page on her cell phone was full of many news articles. It was not fake. In the photos in the news, there was a scene of Li Nanheng getting out of the limited edition extended wedding car. The photo only showed his silhouette. She couldn't see the man's eyes or expression. She could only see that he was surrounded by the media, wearing a black suit without a single wrinkle. Even the silhouette was beautiful. He was born to be superior and no one could match him. When he put on the black uniform, he was an invincible warrior. When he put on the suit, he was superior. As those people said, he was far inferior. The man seemed to be holding a bouquet of white roses in his hand. Fong Ling didn't know what the white roses represented, but in the background of the photo, there was a sea of white roses in front of the Fong family's house. He was going to marry Fong Mingzhu today. He clearly said that Fong Mingzhu was not his fiancée. He clearly said that he didn't have any feelings for Fong Mingzhu. But he still married the daughter of the Fong family. And unbeknownst to her, when she had finally let go of her armor and was ready to embrace the love that had moved her, he had gone to marry someone else. Fong Ling stood in the cafeteria holding her phone and did not move for a long time. When she raised her eyes again, her gaze was calm and dead silent. She abruptly walked out. It was already past dinner time, and the training camp of Team 1 was very quiet. There were only a few members sitting in the corner, chatting and smoking. When they saw Fong Ling, they raised their hands to greet her. But she walked straight into Han Jin's residence with no expression on her face. As soon as she entered, she came to the door of Han Jin's room. She wanted to go in and ask them. They must know what was going on. She was about to knock on the door when she suddenly heard the conversation inside. Xiao Su had just come over and was in the room. From the beginning, when he learned that Boss Li was married to the Fong family, Xiao Su was also very shocked. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. He felt that this was not something Boss Li could do. In the past, he only heard that the Li family seemed to have an engagement with the Fong family, and everyone thought that Fong Mingzhu would marry Li Nanheng. But later it seemed that the situation was not like this, and Boss Li had no intention of marrying Fong Mingzhu. So what on earth was going on? Boss really got married today? Xiao Su sat in Han Jin's room, took out a cigarette and hesitated to smoke it. Han Jin glanced at him. How could this kind of thing be fake? What about Fong Ling? Boss and Fong Ling are clearly in love recently. Now many people in the base don't know the situation, but we too know very well that Fong Ling is also a woman. How can she stand it? Does Boss plan to have a wife outside and a woman in the base? Does he not lack women to accompany him? Don't talk nonsense. Is Boss that kind of person? I know Boss is not this kind of person, but this is not right. Did he tell Fong Ling anything? Did he suddenly get married? Fong Ling is still waiting for him to come back in the base? Even if Boss comes back, he will be a married man. What does he think of Fong Ling? Seeing Xiao Su's expression, Han Jin was puzzled. Boss has his own ideas. We all know how he treats Fong Ling, but the matter between the Li family and the Fong family is not so simple. He also has his responsibility. In front of the person he likes and the responsibility, Boss chose the responsibility, which is what a man should bear. What about Fong Ling? Fong Ling is still young. In fact, she just had a fruitless relationship. Even if she knows about this, she will be sad for a few days. Sad for a few days? Do you expect Fong Ling to fall in love with someone else? Didn't you find that she is gradually opening up to Boss? She is not as boring as before. She has Boss Lee in her heart, but she doesn't express it. Now if she knows, I guess she won't say anything. Then don't say it. It's good for everyone to live in peace. Damn it, when you saw the two of them together, you were the first one who was excited. Now Boss got married and left Feng Ling in the base and you say this kind of thing? What can I say? I can drag Boss Lee over and force him to marry Feng Ling. You know the status of the Li family. Even if Boss Lee is willing to come back and marry Feng Ling now, those elders are already very merciful. They are already very merciful if they don't cut Feng Ling into pieces, okay? So what's going on now? It means that when Boss Lee was feeling empty in the base, he found out that Feng Ling was a woman, and then he suddenly had a girl to entertain him. And a girl like Feng Ling is just a pastime for him. He just wants her and throws her away as he pleases. Don't be so extreme. Boss didn't say this kind of thing. In my eyes, this is what Boss Lee means now. Seeing that Xiao Su was not calm at this moment, Han Jin didn't have the patience to care about these things. After all, this was Boss Lee's own decision. Until now, no one knew what happened. Han Jin sneered. Damn it, she's just a woman. We are all adults. They just fell in love. So what? Compared with Miss Feng of the Feng family, Feng Ling is an orphan with an unknown identity. As long as you are not stupid, you will know who to choose. Chapter 994. Xiao Su suddenly smashed the ashtray on the table to the ground. What the hell are you talking about? Han Jin said with a straight face, it's not Boss Lee who dumped you. Why are you so *king excited? I've liked so many women since I was a child, and I've slept with many women before entering the base. If they all waited for me to marry them, I would have already had a group of wives and concubines. Why do I still need to be a drill master in the base? In the end, Han Jin kicked the chair impatiently. Isn't she just a little girl who disguised as a man and hid in the base for a long time? She's not feminine at all and so violent. It's okay for her to be a comrade, but it's normal for him to be surprised when he accidentally found out that she is a woman. Why do you think she is worthy of Boss Lee giving up the engagement with the Feng family? Do you dare to say that Boss Lee's love for Feng Ling is just a coincidence? Otherwise, which man will be faithful to a woman until death? Are you stupid? He doesn't like Feng Ling? Liking her doesn't mean he has to take responsibility. A silly girl like Feng Ling is not suitable for him. Then why the *ck did you help me set them up? I didn't know Feng Ling was a woman when we were matchmakers. I found out later, but now he's married to the Feng family. What else can I say? Han Jin knew that he was annoyed and said something against his will, but when he thought that Li Nanheng was married to the Feng family, he didn't want to talk about this matter anymore, so he said, Feng Ling and Boss shouldn't be in the same world. If it weren't for the base, the two of them would have nothing to do with each other. I guess Feng Ling knows very well that it's good for them to go their separate ways in the future. Boss, you're not from the same world. If it weren't for the base, the two of them would have nothing to do with each other. I guess Feng Ling knows it very well. Han Jin said again, Feng Ling is an orphan. She doesn't even know who her parents are. Will you marry her? If they don't belong to the same world, they shouldn't force their way in. She should fall in love while she is young. When she grows up, she will know not to trust men easily. I think Boss Lee taught her a good lesson. At least she won't be easily cheated in the future. After all, she is too naive. Han Jin didn't know what to say. But looking at Xiao Su's furious expression, he just wanted to get this matter over with as soon as possible. After all, they didn't know what Boss Lee was thinking, but since it was over, they could only think from another perspective. One of them was angry while the other was impatient. The thin wooden door was unable to suppress the intense voices. No one noticed that there was a person standing outside the door. He stood there, his eardrums swollen from the argument between the two men in the room. Strangely, the place that was shattered seemed to be somewhere else. Feng Ling just thought that Li Nanheng wouldn't do such a thing. She felt that there must be a reason for this matter. Usually, Han Jin and Xiao Su had been following Li Nanheng, and they were the first to know everything. They would definitely know what had happened. However, the fierce quarrel in the room made her heart, which had been pounding since she heard the news in the cafeteria, completely calm down. Not only did it quiet down, it was stuck in its chest. He was motionless as if he was dead. Separated by a door, the people in the room were still arguing fiercely. The people outside the door paused for a moment and left quietly. Feng Ling left. When she stepped out of the training camp of Team 1, Fat Tai happened to come back at this time. He walked too fast and bumped into her arm. When he looked back and saw it was her, he hurriedly asked her, Feng Ling, why are you here? Did you also hear that Boss is getting married? Did you also come to ask for wedding candies? I tell you, boss is so mean. He didn't even tell the base that he was getting married. Now, not only did he not drink the wedding wine, but he also didn't eat the wedding candies. Although they usually made fun of Feng Ling and Boss Li, many men were very simple in their bones. What could two men do? They just fooled around. Since Boss was married today, the Feng family's daughter was Mrs. Li, and this Feng Ling was still the Feng Ling of their base. There was no change. Seeing Feng Ling didn't speak, Fat Tai was about to press her shoulder, but coincidentally, he pressed the place where she was bitten by the snake. Feng Ling instantly retracted her arm as if she had been electrocuted. She remembered that day on the stone platform under the cliff of the Snake Valley. Li Nanheng cut her wound with a cross knife and sucked out the poisonous blood for her regardless of his own safety. That day she was cold and numb all over. Only the wound he sucked out was faintly hot, which made her feel that she was still alive. Looking at the man in front of her who had been trying to save her, she knew that there was someone in this world who cared so much about her life. And now, the small place on her shoulder with the cross knife mark had no warmth at all. Even if it was just pressed like this. She couldn't help trembling in pain. For so many years, Feng Ling had never felt that it was so long to walk from the training camp of Team 1 to the training camp of the sniper team. Even though it was past dinner time, the teenagers who had just entered the base were still receiving training. They ran 4 laps around the base and from time to time, someone called her name. Brother Feng. Brother Feng. Feng Ling. Master Feng Ling? There were also some people assigned to other teams who had only heard of her name and did not recognize her. As they ran, they looked in this direction blankly, only to see a thin figure walking in the dark of the base. She didn't say a word and just returned to the training camp of the sniper team. She wanted to go back to her room to stay alone, but found that it was terribly quiet now. No one could get close to the sniper team, including the newcomers who were running laps. It was too quiet, so quiet that her heart felt a little empty. She simply turned to the empty training ground of the sniper team, picked up the sniper rifle that had only 5 bullets left, and fired a shot in the direction of the target that was as far as 500 meters away on the training ground. Bang! The distance of 500 meters, even the fastest bullet had to fly for a while. 2 seconds later, she hit the bullseye. In her 4th year in the base, when she didn't know whether she was 17 or 18 years old, she achieved the standard target of 500 meters and hit the bullseye. Then what else? She wanted to stay in 11 base and stay here forever. But just like what Han Jin said, some people were just moved and impulsive for a short period of time. Was she going to pester others to take responsibility for her? But if she saw him in the base in the future, how should she face him? Bang 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 bang. Another 4 shots. 500 meters. Every shot hit the bullseye. At this moment, Feng Ling knew that with her results in the sniper team, even if she didn't take the assessment, she had already graduated. Chapter 995. She had never thought that she would encounter such a thing. The environment that she was used to in the past suddenly seemed to be an ice cave, with ice thorns everywhere. She felt pain all over her body with every step she took. She walked to the gate of 11 base in a daze and wanted to go out, but she still stopped. When she walked to the gate, she looked blankly at the wide suburb night outside the base. She was asking Feng Ji, did she do anything wrong? If she didn't do anything wrong, why did she have to be treated like this? If she didn't do anything wrong, why did she have to leave? The girl standing in front of the base turned and walked back. She was thinking. In fact, there were still many clues. For example, she had long heard of the engagement between the Li family and the Feng family, but when Li Nanheng said he wouldn't marry Feng Mingzhu, she believed him, but she forgot the status of the Li family and the Feng family in the American Chinese community. If it wasn't true, how could they allow such rumors to spread, and even the noble Miss Feng often talked about it. For example, Li Nanheng seemed to be very polite to the Feng family. When she took back the bag for the old lady on the street, she could feel it when they had dinner that night. Although Li Nanheng didn't talk much, he was usually arrogant and domineering in front of the Feng family, which meant that the Li family and the Feng family were indeed very familiar with each other. For example, Li Nanheng only left the base for a few days, but he seemed to be saying goodbye before he left. Feng Ling stood on the training ground for a long time and looked at her phone. It was already more than an hour later than the usual time when Li Nanheng went back to rest. She looked up at Li Nanheng's room. The light in the room was off. Even though she knew that he wouldn't come back at this time, at that moment, Feng Ling really hoped that a miracle would happen. She hoped that the light in the room would be on, and she hoped that Li Nanheng would come out of the window, stand on the balcony smoking, squint at her with a faint smile and then mock her. "Fool, how dare you believe all the rumors? It wasn't until she was tired of standing that she looked away from the dark room and walked straight to the door. Kay couldn't find Feng Ling that night. When he heard the gunshots, he came down to have a look, but he didn't see her. He didn't know where she had gone until Feng Ling returned downstairs. As soon as she saw Kay squatting in front of the door smoking, Feng Ling looked at him calmly as if she didn't see him and walked past him. "Hey Feng Ling," seeing that she was back, Kay suddenly stood up and stamped out the cigarette butt. "Let's go and play cards. They want to play with us today, and they also called the new drill master. There are not many training tasks on the weekend tomorrow. Let's play until dawn." Feng Ling shook her head and walked in steadily. She didn't need others to distract her in this way, and she didn't need others to accompany her. She was clear about her own affairs and she knew what she should and shouldn't do. She was just careless when she should have been guarding her heart, that's all. "Feng Ling, I'm calling you to play cards," Kay called her again. "I'm not fighting anymore. You guys fight. How can you not go? We want a 3v3. However, no matter what Kay said, Feng Ling still went upstairs without looking back. Seeing Feng Ling like this, Kay stood there helplessly. He could see that the relationship between Boss Li and Feng Ling was not a simple brotherly relationship. But the elders of the Li family probably wouldn't accept the fact that Boss Li liked men. He felt that if Boss Li didn't get married, he would be unfilial, but if he did, he would be heartless. No matter what he did, he wouldn't be a good person. Feng Ling went back to her room. But after taking a shower, she couldn't fall asleep. At 1 o'clock in the morning, when there was no one around, she went out to run laps in a white short-sleeved t-shirt. She didn't know how long she ran. In short, she ran until she was panting violently and sweating all over. She was so tired that she felt that she could lie on the bed and fall asleep at any time. Then she dragged her tired body back to her room. This time, after taking a shower, she lay on the bed. Her body was so tired that she couldn't even get up, but she still didn't feel sleepy at all. She just closed her eyes and forced herself to sleep for a while. 20 minutes later, she opened her eyes. Her heart was beating fast after the exercise, but she found that she couldn't feel her heartbeat. It seemed that she was very numb. She couldn't fall asleep, so she suddenly got up, went to the corner of the room and opened a cabinet there. There were 3 bottles of wine in the cabinet, 1 bottle of white wine, 1 bottle of foreign wine, and 1 bottle of red wine. These were all given to her by Han Jin several times when he was in a good mood, but she didn't drink them. She had given Boss Li wine once before, but Han Jin had too many bottles of wine and gave them to whoever he liked. Maybe because Han Jin liked her so much, he simply gave her several bottles. Feng Ling didn't know which kind of wine was good, so she took out the 58 proof brandy, opened the window with the bottle, and looked at the dark balcony next door. Then she leaned against the balcony railing, raised the bottle and took a sip. She had never drunk this kind of brandy before. It didn't taste good, but it didn't seem to be as bad as those white wine. She smacked her lips a few times and felt that there seemed to be a little sweetness in her mouth. The sweetness after the wine was very wonderful. She never drank, so she really couldn't sleep tonight. Anyway, according to Kay and the others' understanding of her, if she was too drunk to get out of bed tomorrow and didn't go to training, Kay and the others would find a suitable reason to ask for leave for her. In short, it didn't matter even if she was drunk. Get drunk once. She would forget everything after getting drunk once. The short-haired girl leaned against the balcony, raised the wine in her hand again, took a big sip, and then swallowed it with a frown. And then, 1 sip after another and another sip after another. But even though she felt that she was in a trance, Feng Ling felt that she was unprecedentedly sober. She knew very well that behind the name Feng Ling was an unknown orphan, a small role who couldn't bring any benefits to the Li family, and an existence that even she didn't know how to survive in this world. Early the next morning, Feng Ling, who had slept drunk on the balcony all night, felt her body was suddenly cold and hot, and her head was splitting. She turned over and opened her eyes, only to find that she had fallen asleep on the balcony. The weather last night was almost -3 or 4 degrees, but she actually fell asleep here in a short-sleeved t-shirt. Enduring the headache, she was about to sit up, but suddenly she heard a violent and urgent knock on the door. Chapter 996. The knocking on the door did not stop, and it was very urgent. She struggled to get up from the ground, but her legs were so weak that she staggered and fell directly into the French window that had been open all night. Her head hit the leg of the table near the window, and she felt a strong sense of dizziness in her head. Then the door was suddenly kicked open. She raised her head, opened her eyes, and saw that it was several members of the other teams of the base who came in. After coming in, they looked at her expressionlessly, and then quickly opened all the drawers in her room, rummaged through all her things and put them into a big bag. Then they picked up the 2 suitcases she put under the bed and walked out. "What are you doing?" Seeing their movements, Feng Ling had a bad feeling in her heart. She frowned and asked hoarsely. At the same time, the other 2 members came over and pulled her up from the ground. Feeling the heat on her arms and the strong smell of alcohol on her body, they directly carried her out. "Let me go." Feng Ling tried to struggle, but now her strength seemed to have been hollowed out. She couldn't even stand steadily, but she was carried out by the 2 people. When those people opened her drawer expressionlessly and took away all her things, she already had a strong premonition. These people suddenly rushed in and acted so rudely. Maybe her gender had been discovered. But who was going to take away her things? Feng Ling was so uncomfortable that she didn't even have the strength to struggle. When she was taken to the widest training ground opposite the base hall, she was still in a trance and didn't have time to look at the members of the base standing around. It seemed that the members of all the teams were here, almost forming a circle nearby. Then she saw the elders standing in front of her. They were the elders of the Li family. For so many years, they had never directly appeared in the base. Usually, they just passed by in cars and never showed up in front of so many people. Just as Feng Ling's heart was beating wildly, those people took her over to the elders of the Li family and threw her to the ground mercilessly. Feng Ling was originally lifted up and could not stand steadily. This time she fell forward to the ground. The ground here was full of mud and gravel. Under the short-sleeved t-shirt, the skin on his hands and forearms were instantly scraped. It was a burning pain and even his knees were knocked hard on the ground. At the moment when Feng Ling was pushed to the ground, the people behind her poured all the things in the bags to the ground, opened her 2 suitcases, took them to the elders of the Li family and laid them flat. All the things placed in them fell into everyone's eyes. Seeing the packs of sanitary napkins on the ground and the long strips of cloth in the suitcase, which were suspected to be chest wrappings, the members of the base all looked at her differently. Some were surprised, some were enlightened, and some were confused. Was Feng Ling really a woman? Feng Ling raised her head with some difficulty. Her eyes were filled with the discomfort of the hangover and the anger in her heart because the truth had been revealed. More and more red veins appeared in her eyes. She grabbed the hard soil on the ground and raised her head to look at the elders who were looking at her with disdain and anger. "Feng Ling, do you need us to say more?" Li Junyan looked at the things used by women on the ground and his eyes were filled with dissatisfaction and disdain. Feng Ling's hands were still gripping the ground tightly, and she looked at him with reddened eyes. He was Li Nanheng's biological grandfather. Last time, when she was in trouble in the military in order to protect Li Nanheng's image, he had more or less spoken up for her in front of the military. Although his direct purpose was to protect Li Nanheng and the Li family's image, they had still met once. Li Nanheng's eyes were red. The other elders stood behind Li Junyan and whispered to each other, "Mingzhu has always suspected this. I didn't believe it, but I didn't expect it to be true. Fortunately, Mingzhu found the evidence. Otherwise we wouldn't have come here. If we didn't know about this, we would have allowed such a little girl to stir up trouble in the base." "That's right. It's outrageous. A young girl actually pretended to be a man and mingled with a group of men. Nanheng was so protective of her and ignored the Feng family's engagement. I think he must have been bewitched by this little vixen." These words were just a private discussion among the elders. Boss Li Junyan still looked coldly at Feng Ling, who was lying on the ground. "You hid in the base for so long. What's your purpose?" Kay and the others were also in the crowd. When they saw those things, they knew that the rumors were true. However, seeing Feng Ling lying there in a dazed and seemingly weak state, they remembered that Boss Li had just gotten married yesterday. It must have hurt her a lot. Today, the elders of the Li family actually came to find her. Looking at the things on the ground, it proved that she was indeed a woman. Kay and the members of the sniper team looked at each other, and their faces were all a bit ugly. Of course, their faces were ugly not because the fact that Feng Ling was a woman had been exposed, but because Feng Ling looked like she could be slaughtered at any time, which really made them unable to bear it. However, the elders of the Li family were all here, and they couldn't say or do anything. If they stood up to help Feng Ling up now, the rumor that Feng Ling had messed up the base would be confirmed. They would say that she had an ambiguous relationship with the men in the base, which would only hurt her more. "I'll give you 2 choices. First, tell me your purpose and the reason for staying in the base and then pack up and get out of the base. Second, throw away all your things and get out." Li Junyan narrowed his eyes coldly at Feng Ling, who was lying on the ground. It took Feng Ling a long time to find the strength to speak, but her voice was low and hoarse. Even if she wanted to speak clearly, her voice couldn't be much higher. The dizziness in her mind almost made her collapse, but in such a situation she had to stay awake. Chapter 997. Aren't you ashamed to say that? 11 base never accepts women, but you disguised yourself as a man for so long in order to sneak into the base? I've lived like this since I was a child. I didn't deliberately disguise myself. I was like this before I entered the base. Seeing that she couldn't hide it anymore, Feng Ling simply told the truth. For me, there's no difference between a man and a woman. It doesn't make any difference. You're a woman mingling with men. You say it doesn't make any difference, but as long as anyone knows that you're a woman, do you think these guys who don't even have a chance to see a woman in the base won't be tempted? I think you're shameless to a certain extent. If we found out a little later, your room would have been a brothel. Hearing Grandfather Li's words, Kay and the others immediately frowned, especially Kay, who couldn't help but come out and say, "No, Mr. Li, if you know Feng Ling's character, you'll know that she can't do that kind of thing. She usually keeps a distance from many people in the base, and even the members of our sniper team don't often hang out with her. She's very cold to others. It's definitely not what you think. Her character is definitely worth testing, and she has always adhered to the system of the base." Tam hurriedly pulled Kay back and lowered his voice to say, "Don't talk. Don't you see that Mr. Li is angry?" Of course, Kay knew that, but it was too much to say that to Feng Ling. Grandfather Li first turned his eyes to Kay's face, and then coldly looked at Feng Ling, who was lying on the ground. She stinks of alcohol and can't even arrive on time for training. Obviously she has a hangover all night. How can you say that she adheres to the system of the base and that her character is worth testing? Kay was speechless. Yesterday, it was not surprising that Feng Ling drank last night. But this kind of thing couldn't be explained here at all. If Mr. Li knew that the relationship between Feng Ling and Boss Li had already gone beyond the scope of ambiguity, perhaps he would only be more ruthless. Stinks of alcohol. Feng Ling suddenly wanted to laugh. She raised her eyes to look at the coldness in Grandfather Li's eyes. She wanted to regain her dignity and wanted to get up, but found that she couldn't do it at this moment. All her private things were thrown around for everyone to see and became the topic of conversation. She lay on the ground, looking up at the real owner of 11 base. Even if Li Nanheng was the behind-the-scenes boss of 11 base, Grandfather Li was his grandfather and his elder. No matter what, Grandfather Li was still above him. So, her dignity was trampled underfoot. Thus, she really laughed and slowly let go of the mud that had been crushed by her. She said in a low voice, "I'm very sorry to let Elder Li see me in such a sorry state. People say that as long as you do one thing wrong, everything you've done will be denied. So, I've already been denied by 11 base, right? Really? How dare you ask me? What right do you have to ask me?" Li Junyan scolded coldly. "It's already polite of us to use this method to confirm that you are a woman instead of asking people to strip you naked. Do you think you can still stay in 11 base?" Hearing this, the only hope in Feng Ling's heart was instantly shattered. She had once thought that if she could no longer keep her secret, perhaps she would find a suitable time to leave. Perhaps she would die outside during a mission. That way no one would know about it. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. However, it seemed that everything did not go in the direction she thought. She was actually kicked out of 11 base in such a humiliating way. She was about to be kicked out of this place where she had lived for several years, the home she thought was her home. She lowered her head and continued to laugh, digging her fingers into the mud again. "So, Mr. Li, do you mean to drive me away today?" she asked hoarsely. Seeing her lying on the ground weakly but still so proud, the other elders walked over and said coldly, "Little girl, who gave you the courage to live in 11 base for so long? What the base taught you is to show how powerful you are as a woman here. Everything you have now is given to you by 11 base. I think the money you have earned from missions over the years is enough for you, an orphan with no parents, to live a good life outside. We didn't confiscate all your things but just let you leave the base. Why do you come back to bite us? An orphan with no parents." Feng Ling gritted her teeth and finally managed to sit up. Sitting on the ground, no one came to help her. Most people didn't want to help her, and a small number of people didn't dare to help her. She staggered to her feet with great effort, but she stood there swaying with the smell of alcohol all over her body. When she finally stood firm, her legs were so weak that she could fall at any time. She smiled and raised her eyes to look at them. "So you've investigated me thoroughly and then came to the base to throw my things on the ground, just to let everyone see that I, Feng Ling, am a woman, and then under such circumstances, you chased me away and made it impossible for me to return to 11 base in the future, right? You still want to come back?" The elders immediately glanced at her coldly, their eyes full of disdain. Feng Ling smiled coldly. Since I was driven out so shamelessly and disgracefully, how could I come back? It's good that you know. The base will not accept you again. With that, the elders turned around and walked into the base hall with the help of a few base members who were good at reading eyes. Obviously, they would no longer pay attention to her. Since the elders had left, the people around them didn't dare to watch anymore and gradually dispersed. However, there were still people who would point in her direction and make comments. Then they looked at her flat chest under the t-shirt and felt it was strange. Then they talked about the chest wrappings in the box. There were all kinds of topics. But no one mentioned why Feng Ling couldn't stay. Why couldn't a woman stay? When those people walked far away and walked to the training ground that only they were qualified to set foot on to do daily training, Feng Ling stood on the empty ground. Behind her was the cold door of the base that had been closed, and at her feet were her things and 2 suitcases thrown all over the ground. She silently looked at the ground under her feet, looked at the things at her feet, and then staggered back, slowly bent down with some difficulty to pick up the things on the ground. Chapter 998. What should we do? Lin Cheng and Tam looked back at Lei Peng, who was standing behind them, and then the 3 of them looked at Kay, who had been frowning. Almost everyone on the field had left, and there were only a few people left. These people were all very familiar with Feng Ling, including the members of Team 1. Old Master Li was here. If they went up to help, it would be a slap to Old Master Li's face. If some busybody went to Old Master Li and told him, none of them would end up well. But seeing Feng Ling like this, they really couldn't stand it anymore. How do I know? Boss Li hasn't come back yet. I'm afraid he doesn't know something happened in the base. How could Boss know? I heard that Boss won't be back for at least 7 days, and for some reason, it seems that it's not convenient to contact him recently. His phone is not turned on. Try calling Boss Li? Do you have Boss's phone number? I do. Kay said as he picked up his phone, but after making the call, he put it down not long after and said in a muffled voice, "It's turned off." What the F***ck do you guys think is going on? Feng Ling is actually a woman. She's usually so powerful, but she's actually a woman. This is enough to destroy my worldview. But a woman is a woman. She didn't do anything wrong. Why was she suddenly driven out like this? And Feng Ling reeks of alcohol and looks pale. Is she sick? Now that she's driven out of the base in such a situation, if something happens to her outside, when Boss comes back and asks about it, we'll all be in trouble. If only Boss is in the base. If Boss is here, who dares to do this to Feng Ling? Haha, Boss is now with his newlywed wife. How can he care about Feng Ling? Don't talk nonsense. I always feel that Boss has some difficulties. Everyone knows how he treats Feng Ling. Feng Ling is too pitiful now. I really can't stand it anymore. How can we contact Boss? If he could be easily contacted, do you think these old men would take this opportunity to come over? They clearly want to drive Feng Ling out. Her face is completely ruined. Even if Boss Li goes to find her in the future, she probably won't return to the base. This is the effect they want. They want her to leave by herself. This is too much. Feng Ling's legs really couldn't support her. Originally she wanted to bend down, but in the end she still knelt on the ground. The dizziness in her mind was too severe. The influence of the wine last night was too great. Right now her whole body was cold, but when she touched her arm, it seemed to be boiling hot. Could it be that he got a fever from the cold wind after he passed out on the balcony last night? She slowly raised her hand and slowly picked up the things on the ground one by one. She put the sanitary napkin and breast wrap into the suitcase, and then put them under the clothes. Then she picked up the other clothes and things one by one. She couldn't stand up and didn't have the strength to, so she just lay on the ground and stretched out her arms to pick them up. When she finished packing a suitcase, she put her hands on the ground and took a deep breath. Just when she was about to pick up other things to pack up another suitcase, suddenly, a hand reached over. She paused, turned around and saw Kay, who had walked over without her noticing. "Let me help you." Kay's face darkened. Without saying anything, he picked up the things that had been thrown all over the ground and handed them to her. Feng Ling sat on the ground, looked at Kay's face, slowly withdrew her gaze and said lightly, "Thank you." Hearing that she still didn't want to show too much emotion, Kay frowned slightly. Boss Li doesn't know these things yet. Do you want to wait for him to come back? Feng Ling took the things he handed over and didn't say anything because he mentioned Nanheng. She turned her head and continued to put the things into the suitcase. Seeing that she didn't want to mention Boss Li now, Kay didn't say anything more and just continued to help her pick up things. Then more and more people came to Feng Ling, Kay, Tam, Lei Peng, Lin Qing, and the other 4 members of the sniper team were all helping her pick up things. After a while, Fat Tai, who had been hesitating not far away, also quickly came to help, De Hu and many other people. Many of the people who had interacted with her and gone on missions with her came back at the same time less than 10 minutes after they left. Feng Ling looked at them and didn't speak until Kay picked her up from the ground and looked at her with a frown. "Why are you so hot?" "I'm fine, thank you." Her identity as a woman had been exposed. Feng Ling didn't want to affect them and was about to pull her hand out of his arm. Kay held her tightly. "Why are you acting like an outsider? In my eyes, whether you are a man or a woman, you are my brother. There is no difference. You can't leave now. Even if the Li family's grandfather wants to drive you away, he didn't ask you to leave now. You have a fever. Go to the infirmary to find Dr. Wen and take some medicine." "No." Feng Ling lowered her head helplessly. She couldn't break free from him. Her strength was really no match for theirs, so she could only lower her head and say softly, "Sorry I lied to you for so long." The eyes of the people around her instantly reddened because of her apology. Even though they were all men, they were suddenly affected by such an atmosphere in an instant and felt a little sentimental. "Why are you apologizing? In our eyes it doesn't matter whether you are a man or a woman. We only know Feng Ling Da Hu of Team 1 side. But I didn't expect that such a thing would happen so soon after Boss Li left. If Boss Li was here, it doesn't make any difference whether he is here or not. Boss Li is so busy. Don't bother him," Feng Ling said lightly and then took the suitcase. "Goodbye." Seeing that she was about to leave, Kay and Tam looked at each other and pulled her arm hard. "No, if you don't want to stay in the base now, we'll send you to a small hotel nearby. We'll wait for Boss Li to come back." Feng Ling didn't speak and walked out. They still stopped in front of her. Especially Kay. "Feng Ling, wait for Boss Li to come back." Feng Ling suddenly smiled and raised her bloodshot eyes to look at him. "He's already married. Why should I wait for him?" Kay and the others were instantly speechless. Chapter 999. He was already married. Who could stop her? What other reason could there be to stop her? Feng Ling was not the only one who couldn't accept the fact that Li Nanheng suddenly got married. No one had expected this, so no one could say anything to make her accept it. She used to think that it was just a little bit of intimacy between men beyond the scope of friendship. But now Feng Ling was a woman. It was impossible that Boss Li didn't know. But he got married. Seeing that Feng Ling was weak but still carrying the suitcase, Kay hurriedly pulled her suitcase and said, "There are still a lot of things in your room that haven't been packed. It's too embarrassing to leave with the suitcase. Go back and pack yourself first." The corners of Feng Ling's mouth moved slightly, but it was clearly not a smile. Even the most embarrassing situation is only like this. How embarrassing can it be? Kay couldn't speak, but even if he knew there was no suitable reason to persuade her, he still pulled her suitcase hard. "Feng Ling, don't go." Feng Ling paused but didn't look back. She clenched the handle of the suitcase tightly. "I said wait for Boss Li to come back because the rule that women are not allowed to enter the base is an old rule and should have been changed long ago. You absolutely meet the standard in all aspects. There can be female soldiers in the army. Why can't our 11 base have female soldiers? We will never look at you with prejudice. We grew up and trained together in the base. This kind of relationship can't be eliminated because of gender differences. If you have any difficulties we can help you, but if you leave now we—" Feng Ling lowered her head to look at the shoes on her feet. They were all muddy and dirty. Her pants were also covered in mud from falling on the ground. Her entire body was in a mess and her arms were burning with pain. There were all kinds of bloody scratches on her skin. She had always been incompatible with this place, including Li Nanheng. No matter how hard Kay tried, he could still feel that Feng Ling was forcibly pulling the suitcase away. She really wanted to leave and had no intention of hesitating or compromising. Feng Ling, seal." Kay finally let go under her insistence. She put the suitcases on both sides of her body. Even though she was in a mess, she stood upright. The people around her looked at her and saw her determination. There was heartache and reluctance in their eyes, but everyone knew that what Grandfather Li did today was to make it impossible for her to turn back. Not to mention these members, even Drill Master Han Jin and Xiao Su, who were usually in charge, couldn't even say a word at this time. The Li family was very angry because she, a woman, had been in the base for so many years. If someone kept persuading her, it was estimated that many people would suffer. Furthermore, Boss Li wasn't here right now. The few elders were like God here and no one could resist them. Feng Ling still left. From the moment she stepped out of 11 base, she was no longer a person of this place. She had no right to use any means of transportation here. So she couldn't drive. The only thing she could take away was her shabby suitcase. As for those left in the room, they were just some toiletries and combat clothes. After leaving 11 base, she couldn't wear the combat clothes here anymore. It didn't matter whether she took them or not. Other things would definitely be thrown away and destroyed as soon as possible. Things related to her would probably be shameful in 11 base from now on. She had gone back and forth in front of the gate of 11 base countless times. But there had never been a time like this. When he walked to the door, he looked at the railing below the main door, lifted his foot and stepped over it, then walked straight out. A few minutes later, Feng Ling's figure gradually disappeared in front of the main gate of the base. She stopped but didn't look back. She just stood there for 2 seconds before continuing to walk forward expressionlessly. Kay and the others stood at the gate of the base looking at her back, their eyes red but they couldn't say a word. How could this be? Why did it become like this? Who can find a way to contact boss? If boss doesn't come back, Feng Ling will really leave. The elders of the Li family clearly know that boss has been protecting Feng Ling, so they deliberately drove Feng Ling away when boss was not here. Today they even gathered so many people here to watch. Now even if boss can bring Feng Ling back, Feng Ling can't continue to stay here as a man. How can she continue to survive here? Be rational. But what did Feng Ling do wrong? She is not as delicate as a woman at all. Tell me, when did she cheat in training and assessment? When was she not the best one? What's the point of saying this? In Los Angeles there were not many scenes of sleet. However, it snowed today and the temperature was not low enough, so it became sleet. There were not many vehicles around 11 base, and no car dared to casually approach the vicinity. Under normal circumstances, people who wanted to leave 11 base had to drive out by the base's car or other means of transportation sent by the base. But now, Feng Ling admitted that she shouldn't have drunk last night. As long as she didn't drink and didn't lie outside for so long, she wouldn't become like this. Even if she was found to be a woman, at least she wouldn't be lying on the ground and being insulted by others. But now it was too late to say anything. What she shouldn't have done the most was to let Li Nanheng steal her heart so easily. She shouldn't have given all her bottom line to him. Her biggest mistake was to fall in love with Li Nanheng. She just liked him. She didn't know what love was. But what was the pain in her heart that had spread to her limbs and bones since yesterday? Was it just love? If it was just love, how could it hurt to this extent? It turned out that one day she could also learn to love. It turned out that the word love was really like what others said it would hurt. After walking less than a kilometer away from the base, Feng Ling already felt the terrible feeling of collapsing after 15 hours of continuous devil training. Accompanied by a sudden clap of thunder, she raised her head to look at the cloudy sky and the falling snow. It seemed that there was still rain in the snow. The snow was getting heavier and the rain was getting heavier. Feng Ling pushed the suitcase in her hand forward and stepped on the long suburban road ahead, letting the rain and snow slap on her face as if she didn't feel anything. It was rare to see thunder in this season. Chapter 1000. A gust of cold wind blew through the snow and rain. Feng Ling didn't notice that she was trembling, but her body had been trembling. Her legs, which had no strength, were about to lose feeling. The sleet was getting heavier and heavier, and the lightning flashed and the thunder roared as if it were summer, but it was winter. However, the snow was still fine. The rain soaked her clothes and brought the coldness of the snow in. Feng Ling was already exhausted. She looked at the dark clouds in the sky, raised her head and let the cold snow and rain slap her face. Her pale face became paler. After walking for so long, there were no vehicles passing by, as if this road could lead to the end of her life. But what was there to be afraid of? She had no worries. She gradually staggered and her eyes gradually blurred. When she completely lost feeling in her legs, the 2 suitcases suddenly rolled down the slope in front of the suburban road. Feng Ling's eyes blurred. She wanted to bend down to pull the suitcases back, but she fell headfirst into the cold ground, rolled down several times and finally fell to the side of the road, motionless. 11 base. Kay and the others stood in front of the door for a long time. Seeing the change of the weather, they were more worried about Feng Ling's situation. They wanted to drive out to send her to a safe place. But when they were about to drive out, the door was blocked by several people. Mr. Li said that except for Feng Ling, no other members of the base are allowed to leave today. Otherwise they will bear the consequences. Kay held the steering wheel and couldn't wait to drive the car and knock these people out. But the root of the problem was Mr. Li. Without Mr. Li's order, no one dared to stop them here. This is too much. Fat Tai sat in the back of the car and his eyes were red with anger. How can Feng Ling walk alone in this weather? The people sitting in the car were silent. A few minutes later they got out of the car and rushed back to the base hall in the snow and rain. Looking at the closed door of the hall, they stood in a row and looked at the door quietly. In the base hall, several elders were watching the surveillance footage of the sniper team's training every day. They watched Feng Ling and the other team members together. Suddenly someone came in and said, "Elderly, for members of the sniper team, a member of Team 1, and those people who are usually close to Feng Ling are standing outside in the rain. I don't know what they're trying to do." Feng Ling's expression changed. The elders immediately looked out of the window and saw the tough members of the base standing outside in a row, motionless in the cold snow and rain. Li Junyan's gaze turned cold. What are they doing? Are more than 10 people standing outside to threaten us? How can a little girl who broke the rules of the base be so charming? Ah Feng, who had been sent to the base by the Li family for a long time, was one of the managers in the base hall. Hearing this, he walked to the window, took a look, and then silently looked back at the elders who had been angry because of this matter. Actually, Ah Feng said, if you ignore Feng Ling's gender, she is indeed a very outstanding member of the base. Her usual style is indeed different from what I saw today. She can't hold her liquor well, so she rarely drinks. Even if she occasionally gathers with her friends in the base, she won't drink more than 2 glasses at most. She has good self-awareness. Unfortunately, she's a girl. After saying a few words, Ah Feng suddenly saw the elder's unkind expression and immediately changed the second half of his sentence. He then sighed and smiled. There's nothing we can do. After all, she violated the most basic principle of the base, especially between her and Boss Li. Grandfather Li suddenly slammed his walking stick on the ground and looked at Ah Feng coldly. So you've long seen that Nan Heng is having an affair with this woman in the base? Why didn't you tell me earlier? If Mingzhu hadn't noticed something was wrong, we would have been kept in the dark. If Nan Heng hadn't been guarding the Li family's ancestral hall and couldn't come out, I'm afraid this woman named Feng Ling wouldn't have been able to chase us away. Ah Feng paused. Ah Feng paused. Before this, we really didn't expect that she was a woman. We just thought that she was a slightly good-looking young man. In addition, she has always been excellent in all kinds of tests and is agile. Many tall and strong men can't beat her, which makes it even more difficult for us to doubt her. Moreover, she's in the sniper team and is closer to Boss Li. At first, we didn't think much of it, but later we vaguely felt that Boss Li was indeed taking too much care of her. Combined with the truth today, I said so, but we really didn't find it before. That's enough. Stop twisting words and forcing logic. He's already gone. You can only push all the blame away. Li Junyan turned to look at the people outside and said coldly, if they want to stand, let them stand outside. Which member of the base hasn't been trained in rain and snow? It's fine for them to stand for a few hours. They want to threaten us in this way and demonstrate the rules and customs of the base. Do you think that the 10 of them can change the rules and customs of the base by standing there in the snow and rain for a few hours? What a fantasy. Ah Feng was silent for a moment and didn't say much. He just turned back and said to the people at the door, persuade them to go back. It's useless no matter how long they stand. Why bother to let Eldersley continue to be angry because of Feng Ling? It's not good for either side. Go and ask them to go back first. Brother Feng, we've talked to them just now, but they won't leave. Their request is not unreasonable. They just hope that you can allow them to drive out now. If I'm not wrong, they should just want to send Feng Ling away. Think about Feng Ling's situation just now. Can he walk so far? If he continues like this, he may die. Brother Feng, we've talked to them just now, but they won't leave. Ah Feng frowned and was about to speak when Li Junyan had already approached. He stood by the side and heard their conversation. He said expressionlessly, driving the base's car to send a woman who has been cheating in the base for 4 or 5 years. Let's see who dares to go. Elder Li, Grandfather Li immediately glanced at the person who was about to speak indifferently, and the other party immediately shut his mouth and did not dare to say another word. Ah Feng sighed. He had been in the Li family for so long and knew how difficult it was to persuade the stubborn elders of the Li family. He also knew that what the Li family cared about was not because Feng Ling was a woman, but because when Feng Mingzhu reported Feng Ling to them, they found out that Feng Ling had lived in Li Nanheng's apartment for a long time. They often went in and out of the apartment together at night. This was the real reason why they wanted Feng Ling to leave the base. It was a pity that Feng Ling was such a good seedling. He was clearly the best member of the sniper team. Chapter 1001. The Li Family, the Ancestral Hall. The Ancestral Hall was peaceful and quiet, and Li Nanheng hadn't experienced such a quiet and idle feeling for a long time. He had promised the Feng family that after marrying the second miss, he would bring the second miss to the Ancestral Hall of the Li family and become the granddaughter-in-law of the Li family. 3 days after the marriage, he would accompany the little girl who died in the sea at the age of 1 in the Ancestral Hall. Before, he had never learned too much about the second miss of the Feng family. It was not until the day before he got married that he learned everything from Grandma Feng. She died innocently in the sea at the age of 1. She was indeed a pitiful child. It could be imagined how adorable the second miss of the Feng family was when she was 1 year old. Even after 17 years, the entire Feng family had not forgotten her and refused to forget her. Li Nanheng sat on the straw mat in the Ancestral Hall and looked at the 2 baby clothes brought over by the Feng family. They were pink and small. Although they were carefully put away, they were still a little yellow because of the accumulation of years. Before he married the second miss, he had never considered the situation of others, whether it was children, adults, women, or girls. Everything had nothing to do with him. Perhaps it was only because of the sudden pressure of responsibility that he felt for a child who had passed away at the age of 1. He actually had such an inexplicable compassion for a child who had passed away at the age of 1. For such a child, it was rare for him to calm down and be a vegetarian for 3 days in the Ancestral Hall of the Li family, which he had been too lazy to enter since he was a child. He could also not touch his mobile phone or any electronic products and just accompany this little girl who had no fate with the world. Li Nanheng got up, stood beside the 2 little clothes, picked up the fruit plate next to him, stood there and slowly peeled an apple. Then he cut it into small pieces that could only fit a baby's mouth and put them on the plate. Then he stared at the apple pieces on the plate and suddenly sighed with a smile. He didn't know whether a 1-year-old child could eat apples. Maybe she could eat it, maybe she couldn't eat it. Or should he mash it into mud? What on earth could a child eat? Just when Li Nanheng stood there pondering whether to put 2 bottles of milk here, someone came in from outside. It was Li Jin's, the granddaughter of the 3rd elder of the Li family. Big brother. Before Li Jin's entered the door, he glanced outside and then walked into the Ancestral Hall of the Li family. Li Nanheng stood still and looked back at her. Yes. Li Jin's walked in and pulled up the bottom of her long blouse. Then she took out a black cell phone from the back pocket of her jeans and handed it to him. Seeing that she had brought his cell phone, Li Nanheng frowned and suddenly smiled. I didn't dote on you for nothing. You even stole my cell phone for me. After Li Jin's handed the phone to him, he took a step back in case the surveillance cameras in the Ancestral Hall would capture too much content and attract the attention of the elders. He just walked around the Ancestral Hall casually and said disapprovingly, "This Ancestral Hall has existed for many years. Although there are many Chinese in Los Angeles, only the Li family can set up an Ancestral Hall at home. The elders of our family are really stubborn. Why do they still have an Ancestral Hall in this era? One is stubborn and all 4 of them are stubborn. They are really brothers." Li Nanheng didn't care. He pressed the power button and said lightly, "There's nothing wrong with continuing the Ancestral Hall. We young people are not interested in it. Although the 4 of them are old, they also have their own things. It's rare to hear you understand them so well." Li Jin's turned to look at him. "Your marriage is really strange. What were you thinking at the beginning? Why didn't you marry Feng Mingzhu, a beautiful woman? Why did you marry a child who died at the age of 1? Do you want to bring all kinds of toys to her as a greeting gift?" Li Nanheng didn't answer but looked down at the cell phone with a black screen. "Before you sent the cell phone to me, didn't you think of charging it for me or bringing the charger with it?" "Ah, I forgot." Seeing the cell phone in his hand was not turned on, Li Jin's walked over in surprise, picked it up and looked at it, saying, "But you can't blame me. If your cell phone hadn't been vibrating in the drawer, I wouldn't have heard it and wouldn't have taken it out. Those calls seem to be from the people of 11 base, and many of the numbers are prefixes of the members of 11 base. Let me tell you, you'd better be content. The 4 elders suddenly went out this morning. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had the chance to steal the cell phone for you." Li Nanheng took a look at her. "All 4 of them went out?" "Yes, I don't know what happened to the grandpas recently. Just a few days before your wedding, Miss Feng, that is, Feng Mingzhu, came to the Li family several times, but I don't know what she said to the grandpas, but I can see that they are not in a good mood recently, especially when they look at you sometimes. Haven't you noticed? They seem to be very dissatisfied with something, so I know they will definitely try their best to trick you." Sure enough, I guessed right. Not only did they marry the cenotaph, but they also made you stay here for 3 days and can't use your cell phone. This is really unreasonable. Li Nanheng. Yes, you are the smartest. I'll send you the charger in a while. I just came back from the Li family today. Speaking of the Li family's company, I finally know why you are too lazy to take over it. There are so many things to do that you don't even have time to relax. If I were you, I would rather live a more exciting life in 11 base than deal with those cunning foxes in the business circle. Li Nanheng snorted and casually turned the cell phone in his hand. Don't talk nonsense. Go get the charger. I'll go get it now. What will you give me? I'll ask your sister Li Lin to help you manage the company for a while and let you and your new boyfriend go on vacation around the world for a month. You know, I'm the only one who can ask Li Lin. She won't give face to anyone else. Li Jin's raised her eyebrows. Deal. 10 minutes later. Li Jin's hurriedly walked into the Li family's ancestral hall and brought him the cell phone charger. Li Nanheng glanced at the 2 small clothes and the fruit plate next to him, walked to the other side, connected the cell phone to the power and finally turned on the cell phone. It's 2019. Happy New Year, dear. This is the first time we celebrate the new year together. Chapter 1002. Within a minute after the phone was turned on, countless text messages popped up. Before Li Nanheng had time to see where these text messages came from, his eyes were fixed on one of them. Boss, answer the phone. Something happened to Feng Ling. Li Nanheng's eyes paused on those words. He didn't pay attention to any of the messages that passed by. He slid open the phone screen and was about to call the base. However, before he dialed the number, Kay called him. Kay didn't expect that Boss would suddenly turn on the phone. At the moment when the phone was connected, he almost burst into tears. Boss, when can you come back? Come back to find Feng Ling. She was driven out of the base by the 4 elders. Driven out of the base? What do you mean? Li Nanheng's eyes suddenly turned cold, and some bad premonition clearly and obviously surged in his heart. I don't know who reported Feng Ling's gender to the elders, but the elders suddenly came to the base today and asked people to carry all of Feng Ling's things out and throw them all over the ground. The things she used to cover herself and some things that only girls could use were seen by everyone. Kay said anxiously, also Feng Ling knows about your marriage. Last night she must have drunk a lot of wine alone, but I don't know why she has a fever. When I touched her hand I felt that it was very hot, but boss, you know Feng Ling's temper. If she wants to leave, none of us can stop her. It's raining and snowing outside. It's very cold. She can't go far if she goes out alone with her suitcase. Now the gate of the base has been locked down and we can't get out. I don't know how Feng Ling is now, but when we looked at her before, I felt that she was in a bad state. Kay said anxiously, also Feng Ling knows about your marriage. Last night she drank a lot of wine alone, but I don't know why she has a fever. Li Nanheng suddenly turned his eyes to Li Jins, who was standing next to him. She just said that the elders suddenly went out together this morning. It turned out that this was what they planned to do when they forced him to stay in the ancestral hall for 3 days. Li Nanheng put down his cell phone and turned to walk out without saying a word. Hey, what are you going to do? Li Jins looked at him in surprise. Didn't we agree to stay here for 3 days? If you go out now, Grandpa will. However, the man seemed not to hear her and walked out quickly without looking back. Li Jins felt strange and didn't know what happened. She could only feel that Li Nanheng's expression was murderous. She quickly followed him out, only to see that Li Nanheng went to the parking lot in the front yard of the Li's house, opened the door and got in the car. The black Hummer immediately drove out with a terrible engine sound, raising a cloud of dust on the ground. Los Angeles, Chingla Villa. The short-haired girl on the bed had been unconscious for a few hours. The spot on the back of her hand where the needle was inserted had turned blue. She was still in a deep sleep and had not woken up yet. She frowned because of the headache and cold feeling all over her body, turned to look at the woman on the bed and said hoarsely, "Miss Wen?" She frowned faintly because of the headache and the alternating hot and cold feeling all over her body. She turned to look at the woman beside the bed and said hoarsely, "Miss Wen?" When Licheng looked at her by the bed. Seeing her wake up, she smiled. "Do you feel better?" Feng Ling looked at her for a while, looked around and finally slowly raised her hand, put it on the back of her hand and asked softly, "Where am I? Why are you here?" "It's rare for me to take a vacation in the hospital. I wanted to go to 11 base to find my brother, but I didn't expect to see you lying on the ground on the way." When Licheng said as she sat down on the bed, grabbed her hand and touched it. "It's still very hot. How did you become like this? When I picked you up and brought you back to the car, your body was so hot that an egg could be cooked. There's also a strong smell of alcohol on your body, and there are skin wounds on your arms and legs. What happened? Why did you faint on the way? Hearing the words 11 base, the confusion in Feng Ling's eyes instantly turned cold. She closed her eyes and was about to take her hand out of her hand, when Wen Liqing held her hand and said, I know you are very weak and need to rest now. This is my residence. I often lived here when I was very young. Except for 2 servants, no one will come here. You can rest here. Feng Ling didn't want to trouble others, but it seemed impossible for her to show off now, so she could only say, Thank you, Miss Wen. Wen Liqing raised her eyebrows and looked at her as if she couldn't cheer up no matter what she said. Feng Ling, are you still not willing to tell me the truth? What truth? When I brought you back, your clothes were cold and wet. I just wanted to help you change your clothes, but... When she said this, she pointed to the door of the bathroom. Feng Ling turned around and saw that her dirty clothes and chest wrapping cloth were stacked on the shelf. The fact that she was a woman had been spread in 11 base today. After leaving the base, she really had nothing to hide. She nodded lightly. Yes, I'm a woman. Seeing her suddenly being so frank, Wen Liqing looked at her in surprise. How old are you? You are so young, but you pretended to be a man and lived in 11 base, and 11 base is so strict. How on earth did you do it? I heard they said that you are a very powerful man in the base, but you are a girl. It's really admirable. Feng Ling didn't expect that Wen Liqing would praise the shameless thing that the Li brothers had just said to her as too admirable. She slowly raised her eyes and looked at Wen Liqing, who looked gentle and fair with long soft hair, and looked very kind when she smiled. She remembered that every time Wen Liqing went to 11 base, it seemed that she was for Dr. Wen. She didn't know much about the relationship between men and women, or the relationship between brother and sister. Although she didn't know what was going on, she knew that if she were a man, she would definitely like a woman like Wen Liqing. Not like herself, who had no character, no background, no sense of existence, and no femininity. I'm sorry I deceived all of you, Feng Ling said softly. Wen Liqing smiled. I believe you, but you don't have to apologize. Do you think I didn't see the little ambiguous relationship between you and Li Nanheng when I was in the base? Although Nanheng didn't say anything, I can see that the relationship between you two is not so simple. Chapter 1003. Feng Ling didn't answer her but just looked at the back of her hand again. Wen Liqing didn't know that she just didn't want to mention Li Nanheng. She patted the back of her hand gently. Your fever was too serious. I was afraid that it would be too late to feed you medicine, so I gave you an injection. In fact, in the United States, if it's not a particularly serious disease, we don't advocate injections. I can see how high your fever was. With that, Wen Liqing said, the temperature I measured just now is still a little hot, but at least it won't burn you. Just stay here and take a good rest. If you have anything to say to 11 base, I'll help you pass a message to them. There's nothing to say. I don't belong to 11 base anymore, Feng Ling said in a low voice. Wen Liqing didn't understand what she meant, and then she thought of Feng Ling's suitcase and her lying on the side of the road in embarrassment. She looked at her in surprise. You, 11 base doesn't accept women. My secret has been discovered, Feng Ling answered concisely. So what? Does it matter if you are a man or a woman? You are a good member of the base. Many men are not as good as you. Why do they? Wen Liqing's face was full of displeasure. I'll call my brother and ask him what happened. Even if someone wants you to leave, will Li Nanheng agree to let you go? Feng Ling closed her eyes and didn't answer. Seeing that she didn't speak and her face was so bad, Wen Liqing didn't ask any more and raised her hand to help her pull up the quilt. Okay, let's talk about it when you are better. It's raining and snowing heavily today and it's cold now. I guess the road back to 11 base is deserted and will be frozen. Even if I take you back now, we can't drive back. The icy road is too dangerous. Have a good sleep first. As I said, there are no outsiders here. You don't have to feel any pressure. Just rest. Feng Ling closed her eyes and nodded slightly. Okay. Wen Liqing got up from the bed, closed the window, and turned to walk out of the room. The room returned to silence. Feng Ling opened her eyes and looked at the elegant room. She looked at the crystal lights on the beautiful ceiling for a long time and then slowly closed her eyes. With a bang, the door of the base hall was suddenly kicked open. Hearing the noise, Ah Feng suddenly walked out from behind. As soon as he came out, he saw Li Nanheng, who was supposed to be in the ancestral hall of the Li family, walking in with a cold expression. Nanheng. Seeing his expression, he knew that he knew everything. Calm down. Where is Feng Ling? Li Nanheng drove all the way in, slammed the car door and entered the base hall. He looked around but didn't see the elders and his face became colder. I'm not here. Did you drive her away? It's not what you think. The elders received a report and suspected that Feng Ling is a woman. Today they came to the base to investigate, but they didn't expect that Feng Ling was not in a good state last night. This morning she didn't have the strength to fight against us, so she was brought here and threw out all her things. When she was interrogated, she admitted it herself. Where are the elders? Li Nanheng couldn't imagine the scene of Feng Ling being brought out, thrown on the ground and criticized by everyone. He clenched his fists and his knuckles had turned white. In the sniper team. They said they will throw away all the things in the room where Feng Ling lived and lock the door completely. Li Nanheng turned and walked out and Ah Feng followed him out. Nanheng, the elders are angry. I know you are very angry now, but at this time the key is not what the elders think but how Feng Ling will live. Now even if you can bring her back to the base, I'm afraid she will not come back. Li Nanheng's footsteps suddenly stopped. Kay said that Feng Ling had already known the news of his marriage. Feng Ling drank a lot of wine the night before. Feng Ling was driven out of the base by the Li family. Feng Ling was gone. Feng Ling, Feng Ling, Feng Ling. In his life, Li Nanheng had never been so entangled in his heart because of a person's name. He had never felt such pain as though he was being torn apart. He knew Feng Ling's temper very well. If she knew that he was married, she would not forgive him no matter what the reason was. Her temper was never easy for him to control. Once she was hurt and out of his control, he would never be able to have her again. Li Nanheng walked out of the base hall with a sullen face and went straight to the sniper team. When he arrived at the sniper team, the new drill master saw him and was about to come up to speak to him in surprise, but Li Nanheng walked in expressionlessly and went straight into the building where he and Feng Ling lived. He quickly walked to the floor where he and Feng Ling lived and sure enough he saw several members holding a few wooden boards outside Feng Ling's room. It seemed that it was not enough to lock the door and they even wanted to seal it with wooden boards. What was this? Did they treat Feng Ling as a plague that was driven out? After she left they still wanted to seal everything related to her. What are you doing? The man's cold voice suddenly came. The two people who were about to nail the wooden boards on the door looked back and saw him. They were so scared that they hurriedly put the boards on the ground, turned to him and bowed. Boss, Mr. Li asked us to do this. It has nothing to do with me. Li Nanheng kicked the wooden boards on the ground away and then raised his foot and kicked the two people aside. Get out. Mr. Li had just given them an order and was not here. Now it was Boss Li standing here. The two people didn't dare to say anything. They were so scared that they peed their pants and walked out, not daring to look back. Li Nanheng stepped forward to open the door, only to find that the door was indeed locked. It was not that he couldn't break in. He could just kick the door open, but thinking that Feng Ling would come back sooner or later, he couldn't welcome her with a broken door, so he turned into his room with a cold face, opened the window and jumped over from the balcony. As soon as he got over, he saw an empty bottle of wine on the balcony. Looking at the bottle of wine, Li Nanheng's movements paused for a moment, and he bent down to pick up the bottle, only to see that it was a whole bottle of 58% brandy. This degree of brandy was already considered a strong liquor. She was not a good drinker and didn't even know how to drink. But she sat on the balcony alone and drank a whole bottle. Chapter 1004. The man clenched the empty bottle in his hand so tightly that it almost broke in his palm. At this moment his cell phone rang and Li Nanheng picked it up. Boss, didn't you find Feng Ling when you returned to the base? After talking to you on the phone we finally came out but we couldn't find Feng Ling. With her condition today she can't walk that far. It's at least 20 kilometers from the base to a place where she can get a taxi. She has a high fever and it's snowing so heavily. It's impossible for her to walk out. Boss, when you returned to the base earlier, you didn't find Feng Ling either, right? Li Nanheng took the bottle into the window, looked at the mess on the ground and said coldly, keep looking. Contact the Los Angeles Transportation Bureau and get the surveillance videos along the way and all the roads leading to the city. Okay. With boss's words, Kay was relieved. After hanging up the phone, he hurriedly went to contact someone. Li Nanheng put down his cell phone and walked into the bathroom, only to see that the bottles inside had been broken. Everything was either thrown away, dirted, or smashed. Nothing was left. Just like the little Feng Ling he had been carefully holding in his hand, she was suddenly thrown into hell from a high place within one day. He didn't even come back to save her in time. From dark to dawn, Li Nanheng walked out of the room and saw his grandfather, Li Junyan, who had been standing in the corridor with a walking stick. Looking at the blue stubble around Li Nanheng's chin and the fact that he had been sitting in the room all night, Li Junyan was furious. When he walked over expressionlessly, he raised his cane and hit him hard on the back. "Didn't I ask you to guard the cenotaph of second Miss Feng in the ancestral hall? Who allowed you to come out? You heartless, unjust, and unfilial thing, you really don't take my words seriously for a woman, do you?" Li Nanheng didn't seem to feel any pain. Although he was hit on the back, his expression didn't change and he didn't even frown. He just glanced at him coldly. "If it weren't for the accident in the base, do you think I wouldn't have stayed in the ancestral hall for 3 days? Even if I'm heartless and unfilial, I've never denied what I promised, including the cenotaph that I promised to marry second Miss Feng. Even if I was unwilling, I still married her. If it weren't for the changes in the base, I would still be in the ancestral hall, not here. How dare you King argue with me? You know that Feng Ling is a woman, but you keep the secret and don't tell anyone. This is heartless. You don't respect a base member who has been by your side for many years and even like her. This is unjust. You know that the Li family has always hated women, and you know that I can't let you marry someone like Feng Ling, but you hide such a woman in the base and hold her in the palm of your hand every day. This is unfilial. I didn't directly blame you, but I just drove that woman out, but you left the little wife in the ancestral hall and came to find Feng Ling. Do you think I will give you a chance to see her again? I tell you, Nanheng, don't even think about it in this life. Feng Ling can't marry our Li family even after 3 years. You'd better give up as soon as possible. And let me tell you, I plan to give full control of 11 base to Ah Feng. You'd better go back and take over the Li family. No matter how smart Li Jins and Li Lin are, they are still not half as smart as you. You still put all your attention on the base, but you still made the Li family rise steadily. If you can focus on the Li family business, then the Li family, I won't go back. Give up." Li Nanheng's face was cold as he threw down the words and left. Mr. Li's face instantly turned livid, and he suddenly turned his eyes to Li Nanheng's cold back. Although Li Nanheng usually didn't completely listen to the arrangements of the elders at home, at least he was just a little unruly and a little naughty, and would never refuse in such a ruthless tone. She was just a tomboy who was not even 18 years old. Why did he care so much about her? Mr. Li angrily hit his crutch hard on the ground. Nanheng stopped. However, the man who had gone far had no intention of stopping. "Li Nanheng, are you going to sever ties with our Li family because of that tomboy named Feng Ling?" Li Nanheng's footsteps slowed down a little, and then he stopped, and then in less than 2 seconds without any response he walked out. Mr. Li was so angry that his hand holding the crutch was trembling. This bastard. It was just dawn and Kay and the others had already rushed back. Seeing Boss Li driving out, they hurriedly stopped the car, rolled down the window and said, "Boss, only the road in the suburbs has surveillance cameras and there are no surveillance cameras on other roads. We checked all the surveillance cameras all night, but there is no trace of Feng Ling. Have you checked other roads? It's very dark. I drove around but didn't find her." Kay frowned. Li Nanheng didn't speak anymore, stepped hard on the accelerator, and drove the black Hummer out of the base. Outside the base, Li Nanheng dialed Feng Ling's cell phone number in the car and drove the car to all the roads she could pass. The car drove to the left side of the community leading to the urban area, but there was no trace of Feng Ling. Her number had been dialed countless times, but her phone was always turned off. Where else could she go except to the urban area to find a place to settle down for the time being? There was not even a jungle nearby. She had lived outside for so many years. Even if she grew up in the jungle, it was impossible for her to go back to the jungle. It was impossible for her to adapt to that kind of life. Li Nanheng turned the car around and drove to the urban area with a gloomy face. The Li family. Qin Xiu and Mrs. Li got out of the car in front of the Li family, and Qin Xiu said unhappily when she got out of the car behind them, "Since you've already married my sister's cenotaph, what are you thinking about? This is only the 3rd day of the nominal marriage and you want to come and see it? It's just the clothes of 2 babies. At most, they will be placed in the ancestral hall. What else can you do? Do you have to be so worried?" Qin Xiu didn't speak but just glanced at Mrs. Li. Mrs. Li also didn't speak. A few days ago, she found that the round jade bracelet she had been carrying with her all year round was missing, and she was upset for a long time. After Li Nanheng married Li Nanheng, she felt even more uneasy, so she just wanted to come and see it. Li Jins happened to come out at this time. Seeing them, she came up and said politely, "Mrs. Feng, Mrs. Li, Miss Feng, are you here to see Mr. Li? Is Nanheng here?" Qin Xiu asked. He should have gone to the base. Mrs. Li frowned. He went to the base as soon as he got married? Didn't he say that he would stay in the ancestral hall for a few days? Feng Mingzhu sneered. I guess he suddenly found that the person named Feng Ling in their base is actually a woman. The news that a woman has been disguised as a man in the base for too long has caused a sensation, so he must go back to deal with it. Li Jins didn't know much about the situation, but was surprised to hear this. Mrs. Li and Qin Xiu's expressions instantly trembled. The two of them suddenly turned to look at Feng Mingzhu. Feng Ling was a woman? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.